IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. It's Wednesday, and that means it is Notre Dame midweek rundown time. Going to talk about several topics today. We're going to obviously break down the Notre Dame-Louisville game. We'll dive into that today and go through the matchups, as we kind of have started to do. I kind of like that format, and you guys seem to like that format. We'll dive into just the statistical matchups and then what goes into those and go beyond the numbers. We'll talk big picture offense. We'll talk run game, pass game, and then we'll key in on one aspect of each side of the ball of a matchup that I think is going to be really important for this game for Notre Dame. We'll do the same thing with the defense, and then we'll dive into step-up players who are guys this week that really need to step up for Notre Dame to have success on offense and defense and come away with a victory this weekend. And then we'll talk a little bit of quarterback at the end, and it's going to be a little bit different than last week, but just kind of talk some big picture quarterback stuff. Just give my thoughts on some things regarding quarterback recruiting, the portal, all that kind of stuff. And because there was a really interesting conversation that got a little heated actually with some people about whether Notre Dame should do a quarterback next year. And so we'll dive into that a little bit too. And no mailbag today. I will respond to any super chats at the end, but we'll be back tomorrow. We'll have a little mailbag tomorrow. And if there's any other college football topics that you guys want me to discuss, if there's enough asking for it there down below, I may dive into something here at the end as well. So we'll dive into that as well. So big matchup this weekend for Notre Dame, everybody. I think you all know that. Third straight game against a top 25 team. It's kind of interesting that I'm watching some of the, I don't seek out other people's stuff, but I get sent a lot of stuff. Partly why I don't seek anything out is because I get sent plenty of stuff. And, last week, 2 weeks ago, obviously, there was a lot of people pumping up Notre Dame to beat Ohio State. I thought Notre Dame was going to beat Ohio State. It was a great ball game, back and forth ball game. Notre Dame did their thing. Ohio State did their thing. At the end of the game, Ohio State was one drive better than Notre Dame. Notre Dame couldn't close the end. Ohio State did. And to see the reaction from some in the national media coming out of that game is very interesting. I was surprised there were so many people picking Duke to win last weekend, and I'm surprised at how many people are picking Louisville. I was watching. Somebody sent me a video of something Josh Pate did, where he talked about his little model thing, which that thing needs a reworking, needs some new data input variables or whatever he does for that, but. You're going to look at it and say, hey, he's talking about Louisville should be favored to win the game. And I just don't quite understand that. But it is what it is. When Notre Dame's good, people like to ride the bandwagon. But when they smell blood in the water, they love to bag on Notre Dame. And so that's when you play the way that Notre Dame did the last 2 weeks from a standpoint of sloppiness, that's going to be what happens. And so they're going to get an opportunity this weekend against a good Louisville team, 5-0 Louisville team, ranked number 25 in the country. We talked about yesterday, a team that's got some quality wins on the season, no great wins so far. The NC State win last week was a good quality win. The 4 previous wins over Georgia Tech, Murray State, Indiana, and Boston College were over 4 of the, just worst Power 5 teams in the country, and then FCS teams. And so when you look at where Notre Dame is, this is a test, and a test for Notre Dame that they need to pass before they can get to next week's game. A lot of people kind of already looking ahead to next weekend's game against USC. If both teams win this weekend, USC plays Arizona. If Notre Dame beats Louisville this weekend, then it's going to be a matchup of top 10 teams. And depending on what happens in some other games, both could be ranked even higher than they are right now. But Notre Dame's got to pass this test against Louisville first, and it's going to be a tough test. It's going to be something where we're going to learn a lot about this Notre Dame football team in a lot of different ways. We're going to learn about this team's ability to correct mistakes on the fly. We're going to learn about this team's ability to be a strong finisher. We saw steps of that last week, where the things I criticized Notre Dame for not finishing the week before are things that they did finish well this past week. At the end of game scenarios where you need stops, you got to put drives together. You've got to, be good on first down, close out on third down, all types of different things where, they had their moments where they weren't as good at it and other moments where they were pretty good at it. But they ended up getting the job done. And now they face a test this weekend against a Louisville team that Notre Dame fans should be somewhat familiar with from a scheme standpoint. Obviously, a lot of us have followed Jeff Brom's career at Purdue. Notre Dame's played Purdue a couple times during the Jeff Brom era. And so Notre Dame gets an opportunity to go out there and earn another win. It's going to be a primetime game on ABC. So a lot of eyes are going to be on it. It's just another chance for Notre Dame to put their best foot forward. Here's another interesting aspect of this game that I kind of decided I wanted to talk about really before, kind of after I'd set the show and was sitting upstairs getting ready for the show and was thinking about just some of the different topics. And I do want to stay on point to the matchups and things along those lines. But there was something else that kind of popped up that I said, I want to talk about this because Marcus Freeman is in year 2 at Notre Dame. And so a lot of the things that we're seeing right now are some of them are first time we've seen him in this situation, and only the second time we've seen him in this situation. And so a lot of the things that we go through are, okay, well, what happened last year? Is that a trend? Is that who his teams will be? Is it just a 1-year situation where that particular team was that way? And one example that I'm referring to is, you want to have teams that are, when I talk a lot about finishing, right? And finishing is with each play. You finish off each play at a high level with each series, with getting points on offense, getting stops on defense, finishing off games, so doing what you need to do in the fourth quarter to make sure that your team can get victories. It's about finishing over the course of a season. And you always want to be better in the second half of the year than the first half of the year, obviously, because you want to obviously continue winning and climbing up the rankings. You want to continue to make a good impression on the pollsters when they start mattering. The ones now don't really matter. The ones that'll come out here at the end of October, going into November, which are the college football playoff polls, those matter. And those people are watching now, right? Even though they're not ranking now, they're watching now. And you want to make sure that you get those big wins in the final part of the season to be able to put your best foot forward. So we can say, yes, I know we lost in Ohio State on September 23rd, but look what we've done in the 7 games since then. And this is a chance for Notre Dame to do that. But one thing that's kind of interesting is, we really don't know what Marcus Freeman's football team really is from the standpoint of, are they fast starters? Are they fast, good, strong finishers? Because in the last 2 years, we've seen Notre Dame. We've only known how Notre Dame has started. We don't know how Notre Dame's going to finish this season. And last year, Notre Dame was a slow starter. We saw the offense sputter out of the break. Really, the first 3 games, the offense sputtered. Then they caught up a little bit, sputtered again in October against Stanford. And so through 6 games last year, Notre Dame was 3-3. They had a close win over a not very good Cal team. They had it wasn't a dominant win, but it was a win where Notre Dame was clearly the better team from start to finish against BYU. Took a lead early, never trailed, never tied, other than it being 0-0. And only won 28-20, but we all watched that game. It wasn't as close as the final score. And then, of course, the next week, Notre Dame goes and loses to Stanford. So then we see what Notre Dame does coming out of that. They come out of that loss to Stanford. They whoop UNLV. Was a little bit of a sloppy game, but they won convincingly. Then they had a great road win over Syracuse, where they not great because Syracuse was a great team, even though Syracuse was ranked at that time. But it was a great road win in that you needed to get some momentum back in your season. There was a lot of people that didn't think Notre Dame could win that game, would win that game. You look at where Notre Dame was, just 4-3 and really sputtering, and a lot of questions about, was Marcus Freeman in over his head, whatever the case may be. And then you go on the road, play the number 16 team in the country, a team that at that point in time, I believe Syracuse was 5-1 at that time. They were just coming off of a very close competitive 6-1, actually, just looking at their schedule now from last season. They were 6-1. They were coming off of a very close competitive loss at Clemson. They had beaten NC State earlier in the year, 24-19. They'd beaten Virginia. They'd beaten Purdue. They'd blown out UConn. They'd blown out Louisville, 31-7. And, of course, they blew out Wagner. And so they were considered a very good football team. So apparently there's a national weather alert test coming on my phone right now. Everybody's just conspiring to distract me during the show. So Notre Dame goes on the road. Let's get back on track. That nonsense right there. That was ridiculous. So Notre Dame goes out the second half of the year last year, gets a really great win over Syracuse. Then they're at home the next week, blow out Clemson, A little sloppy win over Navy, but they got the job done. Really big up early. Kind of the triple option got to them second half. And then they went on and dominated Boston College before they lost to you know, a uh, before they lost to a better USC team, right? And so when you look at how Notre Dame finished last year, Notre Dame was a much better second half of the season team than they were a first half of the season team. Well, then you look at this year, and Notre Dame starts off great. You know, they come out and whoop Navy in the opener, beat Central Michigan or beat Tennessee State convincingly. They beat NC State convincingly. They beat Central Michigan convincingly, start off 4-0, and then drop that game to Ohio State. And again, which was a hard-fought game, right? It was a very good game against a very good opponent, number 3 team in the country, back and forth. Just a very, very strong game. And then they come out and last week play a very good Duke team. It was ugly, it was sloppy, but they got the win. So I look forward and I'm like, okay, now we're really in sort of let's evaluate Marcus Freeman and let's find out who Marcus Freeman is. And I started thinking to myself, you know, the hope is that you're going to be a strong second half of the season team. Notre Dame enters the second half of the season. They've got 2 games here before their bye, then 2 more games and a bye, then 2 more games. But you got to ask yourself, what if Notre Dame, if this is who Marcus Freeman is going to be? What if Marcus Freeman is going to be the kind of coach that his plan and how he builds his team is that they are going to be strong finishers? What does that say about who this Notre Dame team will be? What does it say about their chances of beating a team like Louisville, beating a team like USC, beating a team like Clemson? And so we start to say, okay, are we going to learn as we learn about Marcus Freeman? Is this who he's going to be? Or, and this is the flip side of this argument, the concerning part of the argument, it's going to be, okay, but what if some coaches don't establish identities? They're not a team where, you know, hey, this team, boy, you never want to play that team in October, November. If you're going to get them, you better get them early. Some teams are just constantly inconsistent, constantly up and down. Sometimes they start great and they finish poorly. You know, some teams will, at 1 year they do that. Then the next year they don't start well, then they finish well. And we're going to learn if Marcus Freeman is that. You guys remember when John L. Smith was at Michigan State, it seemed like almost every year Michigan State would start off really well, and then they would just kind of collapse. They would have that game against a really good team, and then they would just lose. And you know, I was thinking back to, well, I'm trying to remember what year it was, but there was a year at Michigan State where they were really good and they lost a really close game to Ohio State. But here's an example of what I'm talking about, right? So they started 7-1 that year, beat a ranked Iowa team, beat a ranked Minnesota team, beat Notre Dame on the road. This is John L's first year in 2003, and then fall apart, lose 4 of their last 5. You look at the 2004 season, they just weren't good pretty much the whole year. The 2005 season, they start off 4-0. They go on the road, beat a pretty good Notre Dame team in overtime, 44-41. Then they go on the road and beat Illinois 61-14. And then they fall apart and lose 6 of their final 7 games. And it started with an overtime loss against a pretty decent Michigan team at the time. And then 2006, team starts off 3-0. They lose a heartbreaker to Notre Dame, and their team just falls apart. And that just was kind of John L. Smith's – that's just kind of who John L. was. And the 03 game is the year that they had that really hard, tough loss to Ohio State, and then they just kind of fell apart after that. And that just is kind of who John L. Smith was. There are other teams that don't start great, but they're strong finishers. And so we don't know who Marcus Freeman is. And I started thinking about this earlier this week. Like, you know, this is about the time last year when Notre Dame really found their groove, when they really started to play the best ball, the version of what that team could be. They were the best version of themselves. I think this team has a lot more talent. This team has a lot more toughness. This team has a lot more of other things. But we don't know if this team is going to be great finishers. And we don't know if Marcus Freeman's plan for this season is going to bring about the same thing that we saw last season. And so I'm very curious about this, how what we see is going to tell us a lot about Coach Freeman and who he is as a football coach, and his ability to adapt and improve certain areas of the team, the start to the season, how to build on strengths of his team, the finish, and whether or not Notre Dame can be truly good, strong finishers, because we have seen them this season have two chances to finish games off. One they lost, one they won. And now we're going to get a chance to see it because, as David Knight says, it's a small sampling, and that's exactly right, David. We don't know. Was last year just unique to last year's team? And that's why I'm bringing this up, because it's going to be interesting to see how this team performs, and if year one was an indicator of who Marcus Freeman is going to be as a football coach, then Notre Dame hasn't hit their stride yet. And that's the encouraging thing for me. So I'm kind of fingers crossed on this one that this is going to be a strength of Marcus Freeman's football teams, is a coach who, early in the season, they're going to work out some kinks. They're going to look to establish identity, but second half of the year, boy, you better watch out. And honestly, it's going to need to be that way for a while. When you look at some of Notre Dame's schedules moving forward, early start next season, they play at Texas A&M. After that, they've got a month to get themselves right. Northern Illinois, at Purdue, Miami of Ohio, Louisville, then a bye week, and then Stanford. And then you kind of the second half of the year, you're going to have Navy, you're going to have Florida State, you're going to have Virginia, USC. You look at the 2025 season, it's a bit of a tougher start early. You've got Texas A&M at home, Purdue at home, Arkansas, but then you've got going to have some of your tougher games later. At Miami's probably going to be later in the year. And so you're going to need to be a strong finisher. And then, of course, you want to be a strong finisher because you want to hit your stride when you get into the postseason. And Notre Dame, offensively at least, was starting to really hit its stride last season, because for all the issues that we had with that Notre Dame offense last year, they did score 44 points, 41 points, 35 points, although the 35 points against Clemson, they were aided by two non-offensive scores, 35 points against Navy, 44 points against Boston College, 27 against USC, and then 45 against South Carolina. And that was with an offense that wasn't overly dynamic. So we're going to find out if this is who Marcus Freeman is, and see if he is, in fact, a second half coach when it comes to putting together a team. Because the reality is, and what people have to understand is, no team goes into a season and they're just the same all the time, right? No team just comes out and says, hey, we're just lights out. We're going to be lights out from game 1 to game 13, unless it's a team that plays a really soft schedule. And, I think to like 2013 Florida State, where they just steamrolled everybody. There are teams like that come along every now and then, but those teams are rare, and those teams usually play pretty weak competition. And that's how it was for Florida State that season. It wasn't a very strong schedule. And it's not that for lack of effort. I'm not criticizing Florida State. Pitt was down. They played at number 8 Clemson. That was a decent Clemson team, but Clemson at the time couldn't compete with Florida State. Miami was down. Florida was down. And then they played Duke in the ACC title game and beat them pretty convincing. That was a Florida team, for example, went 4-8 and lost to Vanderbilt that season. Lost to Georgia Southern that season. They lost their last 7 games. So it wasn't Florida State's fault. It's just kind of how it went, is that there was a lot of down teams. So usually teams are going to kind of have their evolution, I think is a better way of saying it. And what's Notre Dame's evolution going to be? Are they going to be a team that started fast and could just never quite get that rhythm back? Or are they a team that's going to really find its groove midseason and really start to play and be the best version of themselves the final 6 games of the season? 6 games, 8 weeks of the season. And we're going to start to learn that this weekend when they play Louisville, because this is going to be a very, very tough test for the Notre Dame football team. So let's dive into the matchups, and we're going to begin with the matchup of the Notre Dame offense against the Louisville defense. This is a very, very intriguing matchup, and we're gonna look at the numbers, and we're just going to begin with just some overall stuff, numbers comparisons, kind of put some context into both of those numbers, and then we'll dive into the run game a little bit, and then we'll spend a lot of time on the pass game matchup, because to me, this is going to be the most important matchup, is the Notre Dame pass game against the Louisville pass defense, and we'll get into why that is. But let's begin with a look at the Notre Dame offense, big picture, kind of the scoring offense against the Louisville defense. And Notre Dame, as you can see, is a top 25 scoring offense. Louisville's a top 25 scoring defense. Notre Dame, from a yardage standpoint, significantly better than Louisville. The Irish rank 26th in the country in yards per game. They rank 11th in yards per play. Notre Dame has the number 29. So obviously Louisville 38th and 51 in those two categories. That's an advantage Notre Dame. Third down is very similar. Notre Dame ranks 29th in the country in third down offense. Louisville ranks 36th in third down defense. Notre Dame ranks 58th in red zone offense, which is not good enough. Louisville ranks 5th in red zone defense. But the Irish rank 18th in touchdowns and Louisville ranks 50th in touchdown defense. So every time a team has scored on Louisville, it's basically been a touchdown. And then you look at Notre Dame and say they've had some misses in the red zone. They've had, you had the missed field goals mainly is really what it boils down to. So they've been stopped on turnover on downs at times as well. And you look at, Notre Dame's much better at putting, when they do get in the red zone, putting touchdowns on the board. And then you look at big plays. Notre Dame has been a pretty good big play offense, although Notre Dame has just one play in the last two games against the best defenses they've played of 30 or more yards. Louisville has been prone to giving up a lot of turnovers. Big plays. Louisville is a very good turnover defense. They've got 9 turnovers in 5 games, so they've done a pretty good job with that. Looking at it game by game, they don't have any big games where they've produced a lot of turnovers. So there's no 5 turnover game. They gained 2 against Georgia Tech, 3 against Murray State, 1 against Indiana, none against Boston College, and then 3 against North Carolina State. And then, of course, the Boston College game was the most convincing game they had against a Power 5 opponent. And Louisville is actually only +2 on the season in turnovers, where Notre Dame has obviously been much more effective when it comes to being a team that they don't force a lot of turnovers. They only have 7, but they've only committed 2 turnovers. And so Notre Dame is +5 in turnovers over the season. So this is, for the most part, advantage Notre Dame just from a pure statistical standpoint. When you look at where Louisville is from a standpoint of the competition, I think that gives us a little bit of a different conversation and speaks a little bit differently about who these teams are. And that's why I say this kind of game is really going to be telling for both teams. So when you look at Louisville, for example, like I said, it's a 24th ranked scoring defense. They had a pretty good scoring defense last year. This year, they're giving up 17.2 points per game. Last year, they only gave up 19.2 on the course of the entire season, which is a quality mark. It ranked them last year 11th in the country in scoring defense, tied with NC State, who you all have heard me say had a very good defense last year. As Ryan and I discussed yesterday, they didn't lose a lot from that defense, and they have a different coach. And Jeff Brom's doesn't have much of a track record of putting great defenses on the field, although there's 2 different seasons at Purdue where they did have pretty good defenses, especially that one year with George Karlaftis. And then last season, they were pretty decent on defense as well. And you look at the offenses that Louisville has played so far this season, and Georgia Tech ranks 64th in efficiency according to the Fermo Efficiency Index. Indiana ranks 121st in offense according to the Fermo Efficiency Index. Boston College is 82nd, and NC State is 111th. So a big part of what they've done is come against not very good competition. You look at Notre Dame, and they scored 45 points against an NC State defense that ranks 18th in the country in defensive efficiency according to the FEI. They played Ohio State, who ranks 9th, and then they played Duke, who ranks 15th. Now, when you look at that and you say, well, yeah, Notre Dame has played a tougher competition, but Notre Dame did not score a whole lot against 2 of those 3 teams. And so they obviously haven't played great in those situations. When you look at Notre Dame's other opponents, Central Michigan was 118th in defensive efficiency. Navy is 92nd, and obviously they also played Tennessee State, who's not going to be on that board. So, Notre Dame obviously has faced tougher competition to put these numbers together than Louisville has, and so that's some context that I thought was needed. But the other context is Notre Dame did not play very well in the last two games. If you look at Notre Dame in the last two games against, I would argue, the two best defenses they've played so far this season, they've only averaged 17.5 points in those two games, and they've only averaged 366 yards. So clearly they've got a lot to prove, and this is a week where they've got to get it back on track. Let's look at the matchup of the Notre Dame run game against the Louisville rush defense. Now, this is a very intriguing matchup, and this is one that honestly Notre Dame should have success with. And I'm going to be a little bit concerned if Notre Dame doesn't have success in this game. And it's not that Louisville doesn't have a good defense. I think their defense it's a quality defense. I do believe that. It's a defense that statistically is right on par with Notre Dame from a pure yardage standpoint and from a big plays allowed standpoint. Notre Dame's been a pretty good big play offense this year. I saw a statistic from somebody yesterday, and I don't remember who put it up, so I'm sorry I'm not giving them proper credit. But it's something like Audric Estime has more yards per play or more gains of 10 plus yards than or 20 plus yards than like several teams put together. Let me see if I can find that. If I can find that tweet. I think a buddy of mine sent that to me yesterday. Yeah, Josh Pate actually put it out, and he says Audric Estime has 10 rushes of 20 plus carries, and that is more than Penn State, Oklahoma, Florida, and Ohio State combined. And so obviously that's a good thing. But you're playing a Louisville defense that ranks number one in college football. And now my big play numbers are 30 yards or more. But when you look at Louisville's rush defense, they've been pretty good this season about not giving up a lot of long runs. And so they've only given up one of 30 or more, but they've only given up two of 20 or more, which ranks 11. So they're actually, if you shorten the distance, Louisville actually ranks even higher in gains of 20 yards or more than they do of 30 yards or more, and they've only given up two. And so Notre Dame is playing a defense that has not given up a lot of big plays. Again, I would argue they haven't played teams yet so far that are very good at running the football. And if you look at the best, so Georgia, just some context, Georgia Tech ranks 56th in rushing offense. Indiana ranks 114th. Boston College ranks 54th. And North Carolina State ranks 70th. So they haven't really played a lot of teams that are great at running the football, which helps their numbers. Notre Dame, so far this season, Ohio State ranks 30th in rush defense. North Carolina State ranks 19th in rush defense. Central Michigan is 77th. Navy is 73rd, partly because of the game that Notre Dame had against them. So that obviously factored into it a little bit, but since then, Navy held Wagner to 84, South Florida to 97. They did give up 190 to Memphis, so they've been a little bit up and down. They ranked 73rd on the season, and of course, this past weekend they played a Duke team that ranks 68th in rush defense. So neither team has been super tested. Notre Dame did go for 107 yards or more against the two best rush defenses they played this season, and so we'll have to see if Notre Dame can get their run game going. I think they should. They have a size advantage. One of the things that hurt Notre Dame against Duke is that Duke had really good size, and they were able to physically beat Notre Dame at the point of attack. Ohio State wasn't able to do that. NC State wasn't able to do that. Those are two somewhat undersized defensive lines compared to Duke and compared to Notre Dame size. And they were more quick and athletic teams, and Notre Dame was kind of able to lean on both of those teams and really get their ground game going. So that's something that has helped them be more effective against those type of looks. But then you dig into a little bit some more of the peripheral numbers, even though they're both ranked 34th in yards and then yards allowed for Louisville. Notre Dame ranks 15th in yards per attempt. Louisville ranks 44th. Notre Dame ranks 19th in touchdowns. Louisville ranks 45th in touchdowns allowed. Notre Dame ranks 9th in fewest tackles for loss allowed per game. Louisville only ranks 87th in tackles for loss per game. And then I've talked about the big play. So this is a matchup Notre Dame's going to have to establish, and it's because that's who Notre Dame wants to be. Notre Dame wants to be a good rushing football team. They want to be a team that's built around running the football, and they're going to have to find some ways to get that going this week. And I'm very curious to see what Jared Parker's going to do. I want to see him get back to mixing up his personnel and being a little bit more diverse with his run game, but also making sure that you're still building around the zone. That's been their best run this year. It's been their most efficient run this year. And the power stuff has been a really nice complement to that. They tried to make it the base against Duke, and it just didn't work as well against what Duke did. It should work a little better against Louisville, but from what I've seen, Louisville has done a nice job of defending those type of runs. They're athletic. They get upfield. They take on those blockers early. So Notre Dame's going to have to find some ways to create some gaps and some creases in their run game when they run those gap scheme concepts against Louisville. But this is advantage Notre Dame on the whole. It's not a huge advantage from a pure number standpoint, but the film tells us that Notre Dame's the better team here, and the statistics tell us that Notre Dame is the better team here. And now it's just about them going out there and playing like it. They're gonna have to play like they're the best team out there. When you look at from a pure efficiency standpoint, the FEI I was referring to, they ranked the Notre Dame offense 13th in the country as the 13th best offense in opponent adjusted efficiency, and Notre Dame is 20th in unadjusted efficiency, so it doesn't take into the context. And then Louisville is the number 59 defense in adjusted efficiency, and then 45th in just total. So no matter how you spin it from an efficiency standpoint, Notre Dame's been the better team so far this season. All right, let's get into this matchup of the Notre Dame pass game and the Louisville pass defense. And so this to me is the matchup that's going to really determine not only this game for Notre Dame, but it's going to tell us a lot about who Notre Dame is moving forward. And this is actually the wrong graphic. Let me find the proper graphic. There it is. I'd already gone there. Thought I hadn't gone away from it, but we're back on there. So if you look at Notre Dame this season and their yards per game, they rank 44th in the country, which isn't great, but that can be determined by a lot of things. You don't throw a whole lot. Sam Hartman had 190 yards at halftime against Tennessee State and didn't play in the second half. So you look at it overall, 44th, not great. They haven't passed the ball extremely well the last two games in their matchups against Ohio State and Duke. They were under 100 yards against Duke or Ohio State, and then they only went over 200 yards against Duke. They ended up with 222 because of that last series. And so in the last two games, Notre Dame has only averaged 198.5 passing yards per game, and they've only averaged, and this is the number that matters more to me, 7.1 yards per attempt. And we can talk about it. They didn't have Jaden Thomas and they didn't have Jaden Greathouse, and that's fair. But the fact is they didn't throw the ball very well against Ohio State either. And so they played two very good pass defenses and struggled. And they're going to have to find some answers because they're going to have to play. If Notre Dame wants to reach its goals as a football team, they're going to have to play against teams that are very good at stopping the pass. And you can't just be in situations, well, this team's good at stopping the pass, so we're kind of screwed. When you look at Duke, at Notre Dame, the peripherals of their pass offense are pretty good. Notre Dame ranks in the top 20 nationally in yards per attempt, 15th, yards per completion, 13th, touchdowns, 5th, fewest interceptions. They're tied for number 1. They've yet to throw an interception this season. They rank 12th in pass efficiency. They rank 16th in big plays, so gains of 30 yards or more. And they rank 19th in fewest sacks allowed per game. And so Notre Dame obviously is thriving in that regard. When you look at the completion percentage, Notre Dame is 30th. So that's one they're down a little bit more, but it is still a good quality number, ranking 30th this season in yards per or completion percentage. When you look at Duke and you look at Ohio State, the two teams that just gave Notre Dame problems, they present a much different matchup for Notre Dame than Louisville does. So Louisville ranks 57th in yards allowed per game. That number can be deceiving because there have been some games where teams have piled up yards in the second half because Louisville led them big. But they rank 60th in yards allowed per attempt, 97th in yards per completion. They rank 58th in most touchdowns allowed, 42nd in interceptions. They rank 47th in pass efficiency defense, and they rank 103rd in big plays allowed. They've allowed 10 completions so far this season of 30 yards or more. Pressing the quarterback, they have one guy who's Gillette, who's got 5 sacks in the season, but that's over half of their total production. As an entire defense, they only have 9 sacks on the season. So that's less than 2 per game, which ranks 86th nationally. Then you look at the teams that just gave Notre Dame problems in the pass game. Ohio State this season ranks 5th in fewest yards allowed. Duke ranks 11th. Ohio State ranks 8th in fewest yards allowed per attempt at 5.4. It's tied with Notre Dame. And Duke is ahead of both of them with only 5.0. Duke and Ohio State on the season have only allowed 5 touchdown passes combined. Louisville has given up 7. And then Duke and Ohio State have 7 interceptions on the season combined. Louisville has actually been pretty good at interceptions. And then quarterback or passer rating, Ohio State ranks 12th with a 104.20 passer rating, and Duke ranks 6th in passer rating. So Notre Dame, the two teams, let me pull this one up too, because Duke is pretty good in this area. Duke has held limited opponents this season to a 53.8% completion percentage. Ohio State's actually not been as good there. They're 47th at 58.6. Duke is 15th. Louisville actually ranks ahead of Ohio State in that area. That's the one area where they're better than Ohio State, is they allow a lower completion percentage. So on the season, Notre Dame has had a lot of success against teams that are close to where Louisville is. Louisville, as I said, ranks 60th in yards per attempt. If you look at the other teams Notre Dame has played, obviously Central Michigan is really bad. They're 128th. Navy this season is 75th, so they're close to Louisville on the season as well. And then North Carolina State ranks 106th, and part of that is because of what Notre Dame did to them. And so when you look at their defense, they gave up 11.9 yards per attempt against Notre Dame, 4.2 to UConn, 7.3 to the VMI. Virginia was at 9, and Louisville's 8.2. So they've been a team prone to giving up big plays, but nobody did to them what Notre Dame did. And so they'd be probably about 15, 20 spots higher if you take out the Notre Dame game and what Notre Dame did to them. So Notre Dame has feasted on teams like this. Louisville's a little better than those teams, in my opinion, though. They've got good corners, physical corners, long corners. They're both about 6 foot, pretty long arms. They're the boundary corner. They allow him to be more aggressive and physical. The field corner is a little bit more rangy. They play him off a lot to kind of play the post and different things along those lines. Their safeties are pretty active. They come downhill a lot. They're vulnerable to giving up the big plays, but they're also a team that likes to create some inefficiency. And when you look at a team that ranks 103rd in most pass big plays allowed, they rank 97th in yards per completion, but they're only quote unquote 60th in yards per attempt. It kind of paints a story that they're 21st in lowest completion percentage. They're willing to give up some big plays, but their thought process is they're going to also create a lot of mistakes from the pass offense and turnovers. They've on averaging right now 1 turnover per game. They picked off NC State twice, Georgia Tech, Murray State, Indiana all once, and they've held Indiana is the only team that complete over 59% on them. Georgia Tech went for 59.4, but their other 3 opponents were Murray State at 36.4, BC at 51.2, and NC State at 52. They held NC State to 112 yards last week, which kind of helps their numbers a little bit. They've been very inconsistent there. They held NC State to 112, Murray State to 72, but Georgia Tech, Indiana, and Boston College all went for 295 or more. The Boston College number is the one that's a little bit misleading because that game was 42-14 at halftime. We talked about this yesterday. It was a blowout, and so of course Boston College is going to be throwing a bunch in the second half. So I don't put as much stock in that one, but this is just a game Notre Dame should thrive in. This is a matchup Notre Dame should thrive in, but it's more than that for me. It's not just about, okay, on paper you match up well and should win, but I really think this game, Notre Dame needs this game pass game wise to really get jump started. Passing the football and being successful throwing the football is a lot about confidence. I mean, you need good scheme and all that, and good players and all that, and you've got to execute. But a lot of that comes from confidence and timing, and just being in rhythm. And right now Notre Dame has no rhythm in the pass game. There's not a lot of confidence in the pass game. You could if you watch the all 22 version of Notre Dame last week, and even to a degree against Ohio State, there are guys that have steps on outside DBs in ways where when I watch Sam Hartman this summer and I'm popping in his Wake Forest film, he's throwing those footballs and they're getting a lot of completions, some incompletions, because when you throw those deep balls, you're going to have a lower completion rate. But when you look at when you look at him at Notre Dame, he's not making those throws. So there's one of two reasons why. Maybe both of them are factoring in. Number one is maybe they're just telling him they don't want him to throw that ball as much as he did at Wake Forest. Possibly. I think that'd be a little bit of a mistake. The second reason is I don't believe he has a lot of confidence right now in the outside receivers. And this is something I talked about in an article today that looked at this matchup. If you look at Notre Dame's production this season, a lot of their production has come inside. And when you look at Notre Dame's leading receivers, for example, this season, Notre Dame's top, let me pull up Notre Dame's number so far, but their top two pass catchers are their tight end, Mitchell Evans, who leads the team in catches and he leads the team in yards. Their number two pass catcher is Chris Tyree, who's tied for fourth in catches, but he's number 2 in yards. Leads the offense in yards per catch. And their number 3 pass catcher is an outside guy, Jaden Thomas. Their number 4 pass catcher is Jaden Greathouse, who is tied for third in total catches, but fourth in receiving yards. He's done all his production from the slot. And then their number 5 receiver is Tobias Merriweather, who has 7 catches for 147 yards in the season. And then number 6 he's an outside guy. Number 6 is an outside guy. Then number 7 is Holden Stace, who's a tight end. But then if you dive into the numbers and you look at Tobias Merriweather's production on the season, 7 catches for 147 yards, 45 of those yards came on an inside play where he was in the slot. So 30.6% of Tobias's yards came in a game where he made a play inside. And so when you look at that production, you say, man, this is a team that has done a ton of damage over the middle. And that's good. That's fine. I like attacking over the middle. And Notre Dame did not attack over the middle in the past. But the lack of production on the outside, especially down the field, is concerning. And when you look at it, I do believe there's we're not going to be as aggressive as you were at Wake Forest. I don't agree with it, but it is what it is. But it's very clear that Sam Hartman doesn't have a lot of confidence in his outside receivers. And I'm not blaming Sam Hartman for that because he goes to Jaden Greathouse deep against NC State. He drops the ball. Yes, they have success against Central Michigan, but they weren't catching balls against Ohio State. They weren't getting open against Ohio State. He finally throws a deep ball to Tobias Merriweather against Duke, and he drops the ball. So I can't say that I blame him, and I would assume that if we were at practice, we would see some of that stuff at practice as well. So that's something that does concern me a little bit, and it's something that needs to be fixed. And this is a game where you're going to have to find ways to answer. You're going to have to find ways to get your outside receivers the football, and then also continue with your success up over the middle. You can't just look at your team and say, hey, here's who we are now. And yeah, we stink at that, and that can maybe hurt us, but we're just going to lean into this over here. There's a level of, hey, this is what we're good at, so we need to make sure that we're continuing to build around our strengths. Sure, get that. But the second part is this. The good teams, the best teams, look at the areas where they're weaker and say, how can we either minimize it or how can we get better there? And Notre Dame has to figure out a way to get better there, whether it's moving guys around, using scheme differently. Players have to step up and play better. There's a lot of different possibilities, but they got to figure it out, and it's got to start this week. Has to start this week. You're going to need it to win the game, and it also, moving forward, it's going to give you a lot of momentum going into future games. So when you look at this Notre Dame matchup between the offense and defense, this is the one right here. If the outside receivers can have success in this game, that's big. And it's because I do like the Louisville corners. If Notre Dame's outside receivers have success this game, it makes everything else so much better. Last year, they had no outside threat. This year, they have no outside threat. They've got to figure it out. And it's not just the players. There has to be more of a willingness to take some of those lower percentage shots. And it just seems like this offense now under two different coordinators has been a little unwilling against the better teams to take some of those shots. And when they have taken those shots, post route to Tobias on Saturday, deep shot to Tobias on Saturday, those plays haven't hit. Jaden Thomas against Ohio State, Rico Flores against Ohio State, Jaden Thomas against NC State, those plays haven't hit. They're going to have to find ways to get them going. And this is a week where it's going to be vital to Notre Dame's overall success as an offense. Let's dive into the matchup of the Notre Dame defense against the Louisville offense. And this is without question the strength on strength matchup of this football game. Louisville has a scrappy defense. It's an undersized defense. It's an athletic defense, but it's not a great defense. They're doing a pretty good job of getting the most out of that roster right now, especially with so many new guys. Where they're making their money right now, with the biggest reason that Louisville is 5-0 right now is their offense, in my opinion. Now, then the most recent game, their defense had to step up and help them win a game because the offense struggled. And that's what, to me, that to me was their most impressive win of the season because they didn't play well on offense. And this is a team, in past years, if Jeff Brom only scored 13 points on offense, they're going to have a hard time winning football games at Purdue. But their defense stepped up and got it done. But this is an offense that still throws the ball a lot. They want to be balanced. They have, when they've been at their best this season, there has been balance. When they've struggled on offense, there's been a lack of balance. And so when you look at this breakdown, this is where Jeff Brom made his money, right? This is why he's at Louisville, is putting together great offenses. He did it at Purdue with subpar talent. He was able to recruit some quality receivers and turn out great offenses. And he's doing the same thing at Louisville already. In year one, just 5 games in, they ranked 21st in the country in scoring offense. They rank 11th in the country in total offense, 10th in the country in yards per play, which is obviously an impressive number. They rank second in the country in big plays, gains of 30 yards or more. That's going to be an interesting matchup against a Notre Dame team that only ranks 43rd in fewest big plays allowed because they have been prone to giving up big plays. Gave up a couple of them, actually 3 of them to Duke last week. Neither team is great in the turnover game. Notre Dame is a decent turnover team. Forcing turnover teams are kind of top half of the country. Louisville is kind of right near in that middle part, and kind of the top of the bottom half of the country when it comes to turnovers. Neither team's very good on third down. Notre Dame doesn't stop and make enough stops on third down. Louisville doesn't convert third down a lot, again, because they're relying so many big plays. And when you look at red zone, that's been a big key for Notre Dame. They rank 6th in the country in red zone defense, 6th in the country in red zone touchdown defense. In red zone offense, Louisville ranks 64th, and then in red zone touchdown offense, they rank 60th. So a lot of their success, as you can see, has come from big plays. Notre Dame's going to have to limit big plays and force this Louisville team to go on longer drives because they have not shown this season to be a team that can consistently do that, in my opinion. And Notre Dame's going to have to make them do that. Let's talk about the run game matchup a little bit. Notre Dame has the number. This is an interesting statistic because I believe Notre Dame has actually been better running the football than their number shows. Notre Dame ranks 52nd in the country in rush defense, allowing 124.2 yards per game. They rank 45th in yards allowed per attempt. They rank 54th in most touchdowns allowed, and they're only 124th in tackles for loss per game, although that did go up a little bit last week because Notre Dame had a season-high 6 tackles for loss against Duke last week. So hopefully, that is a sign of things to come, and I don't think it's a coincidence that it went up for Notre Dame in a game where they finally turned the D-line loose. I don't think that's a coincidence at all. Hopefully that can continue against a Louisville team that has been pretty good at limiting tackles for loss allowed. And the Louisville run game ranks in the top 30 in every category that I showed above. 30th in yards per game, 25th in yards per attempt, 19th in touchdowns, 25th in fewest tackles for loss per game. And then they rank 12th in big plays. They've got 5 big plays. And it just kind of leads to their overall team philosophy of being a big play offense. Now, here's the interesting part about when you look at Louisville's success this season running the football. And let's break it down game by game. Let's go rush offense, game by game. Louisville ran for 227 yards against Georgia Tech, 344 yards against Murray State, 184 yards against Indiana, and 194 yards against Boston College. That is where they have been this year. And then, so that was their first 4 games. We'll get to the last game here in a second. That's where they were the last 4 games. So let's look at some rankings here real quick, and I'll put this into context of why I think Notre Dame should be able to dominate this matchup, in my opinion, as long as they can limit the big plays, which is going to, when you tackle the way Notre Dame has it can be a problem, but they should be able to do it. Georgia Tech, the team that they ran for 227 yards against this season. Georgia Tech ranks 131st in college football in most yards allowed per rush game, fewest yards allowed in the run game, which means they give up a lot of yards. Georgia Tech also ranks 126th in yards allowed per attempt. Then you go to their next opponent, their next Division I opponent, Indiana. Indiana currently ranks 93rd in college football in rush defense. They gave up 184 yards to Louisville. They gave up 143 to Ohio State, so actually a pretty good performance. And then they gave up 263 to Akron, 120 to Maryland, but Maryland averaged 5.2 per carry. Maryland didn't run the ball a whole lot, and that's because they threw a lot on Indiana. I mean, they threw a lot. They went for 24 for 34 for 352 yards and 5 touchdowns against Indiana in a 44-17 win. So they need to run the ball. But when they did run the ball, they were effective. 122 yards on 120 yards on only 23 carries. But Indiana on the season ranks 93rd in rushing offense. They rank 110th in yards per attempt as a rushing offense. A rushing defense. And then you look at Boston College. Boston College on the season ranks 99th in most rushing yards allowed, so fewest rushing yards allowed. And Boston College also ranks 87th in yards allowed per attempt. So they did what they need to do against teams that aren't very good. And I could look up the Murray State numbers if you all want. Let me just look up Murray State's rush defense here real quick and see what they're doing so far on the season. And Murray State, who they ran for over 300 yards against on the season, ranks 107th on the season in rushing defense. Last week, they played NC State. And NC State this season, as I mentioned, ranks 26th in the country in yards allowed per attempt, rushing allows per attempt, and then they rank 19th in fewest rushing yards per game. When you look at that yards per attempt number, a big part of that, if we're being honest, is Notre Dame, because Notre Dame had an 80-yard carry in that game. But if you look at what NC State has done the rest of the year, they've been a pretty stout rush defense. They gave up 15 yards on 21 carries against VMI. They gave up 113 yards on 41 carries against Virginia. That's only 2.8 yards per carry. And they gave up 20 yards on 29 carries against Louisville. So Louisville had more rushing attempts than it had rushing yards in that game. Now, that can be a little misleading, and I'll tell you why here. Louisville had 44 sacks, or NC State had 4 sacks for 40 yards in that game. So if you want to give a more true indicator of what they did running the football, what NC State did running the football, you'd have to say they had 25 attempts for 60 yards. If you take sacks out of the equation, that's still not very good. And it was the first good defense they'd played all year. Now, Notre Dame's rush defense is not as good as NC State statistically. It's been better at keeping yards down overall. And I have to say, the Notre Dame Duke game, by the way, was one of the weirdest games I've seen because when I looked at the stat line for that game and I saw that Duke had 189 yards rushing, it did not feel like Duke had 189 yards rushing, and a lot of it came from a few big plays. But other than that, the most they had given up all season was 131 to Central Michigan. Held Ohio State to 126. Most of that was on one play. Held NC State to 84, Tennessee State to 89, and Navy obviously to 126. So I actually believe that Notre Dame actually has been a pretty solid run defense this season. Certainly room to get better, but I think they've been a pretty solid run defense this season. And this will be a tough test for Louisville, and it's going to tell us a lot about both teams. And so I think Notre Dame should be able to keep the Louisville run game in check as long as they can be disciplined, as long as they turn the defensive line loose. This isn't a great Louisville offensive line by any stretch. They got a tough kid at center, Brian Hudson. Some of you should remember him. Notre Dame actually recruited him out of Kentucky. Coming out of high school, he ended up going to Virginia Tech, transferred to Louisville. He's a quality player. The rest of their offensive line, in my opinion, is not great. It's solid. I mean, it's just solid. You don't rank in the top 30 in all those categories if your offensive line stinks. They don't stink. But it's not as good as the Duke defensive line, which Notre Dame had a lot of success with. So hopefully this is another game where Al Golden turns that front four loose and allows them to attack. And they've played at a very high level in the run game so far this season. And then, of course, you're going to have to limit tackles or limit the yards after contact. You've got to tackle well. The backs that they have at Louisville, especially the starter Jordan, if you miss him, he's going to go. And they're going to have to be effective bringing guys down in space because they're going to do a lot of different things, misdirection, spreading you out to try to get to get their run game going, and that's Notre Dame's have to shut them down. Let's dive into the matchup of the Notre Dame pass. Actually, that's rushing still. Let's go to there we go. This is, from a more narrow standpoint, the biggest good on good matchup of this game. It's Notre Dame's pass defense against Louisville's pass offense. And anyone that knows anything about Jeff Brom knows that Jeff Brom makes a living throwing the football. Yes, he wants to be balanced. Yes, I don't think he's ever wanted to be as run heavy or as pass heavy as he was at Purdue. It was out of necessity more than anything else. His offensively, he had some decent backs a couple times, but they were never able to get the kind of line play that they need to really be effective. And when you look at what they've done this season, they have been a big play offense, but they're doing a lot of the stuff that they've done throughout his tenure. You know, they're spreading the field. They do a lot of stuff behind the line of scrimmage, a lot of quick game, a lot of, now screens and bubble screens and those type of things. So that they'll do all those things they've done in the past. That's a part of who he is, right? That's what Jeff Brom does. He does a lot of different levels concepts. They do a lot of post snap switches in attempts to create mistakes. You saw that in the early touchdown against Indiana, on the big play touchdown against Indiana. So it's really one of those things where Jeff Brom is a really creative guy when it comes to putting route concepts together. I'm a big fan of what he does. Anyone that's followed me any period of time knows that I've always been a big fan of Jeff Brom as an offensive mind. And this year's no different. He's got some really dynamic athletes. They've hit 14 balls of 20 or more yards. But you look at a lot of their stuff, they've had 34 completions from 0 to 9, another 28 completions at or behind the line of scrimmage, according to Pro Football Focus. So they throw a lot of balls short and then down the field. And that's kind of always been Jeff Brom's MO. They're actually completing this season on deep balls. They're actually completing 50% of their deep balls. They've got 6 touchdowns already on balls of 20-plus yards or more. They do have 4 picks, so you can force them into some mistakes. But as I said, they're a team that really likes to throw the ball downfield. Jeff Brom's very creative. They will attack the middle of the field. They always do. It's a big part of who they are. But it's especially going to be true against the Notre Dame team that if there is a vulnerability for Notre Dame, it's been the middle of the field. The reason I would like to see this be a defensive line game this week for Notre Dame is because of that right there. Because I think there are things you need to do with your linebackers to allow them to make the middle of the field less attractive for the Louisville offense. So if you break down their numbers, and I'm going to use Pro Football Focus numbers for you right now. Louisville has completed on the season 86 passes, according to Pro Football Focus. And I'm going to look real quick and see what their actual numbers are. They have them at 95. So I imagine some of these things that they have. This is Jack Plummer's thrown 86, excuse me. And their starting quarterback. He's completed 86 passes on the season. And that's what his actual numbers are. 86 for 132 on the season. Pro Football Focus has him down with 86 completions. As I said before, 14 of them have come on deep balls, which is a decent rate. But he's only got 10 other completions of 10 or more. He has on the season, as I said, 62 completions that traveled less than 10 yards past the line of scrimmage. 49 of them have been in the middle zone between the numbers. And a lot of those, if you watch them play, are working in and over the middle to where Notre Dame likes to vacate. So as I said, they throw the ball a lot behind line of scrimmage. Only 7, 12, 13 of those completions of under 10 yards have gone outside the numbers. A lot of that stuff is working in. Where's the one place Notre Dame has been vulnerable? Working in. And one of the biggest reasons why Notre Dame has tended to be vulnerable in that area is because they've done so much of the pressures, the blitz pressures, and heating teams up and bringing their linebackers on fires and all that type of stuff. And as we've said, that leaves them open. And then the way that they handle technique and different things like that, they tend to be more vulnerable there. And Notre Dame is going to have to, what you saw against Duke. Duke is a team that we talked about this last week. They were a very short game oriented team. They did not throw the ball down the field a ton. They went 1 of 6 throwing the ball down the field against Notre Dame in that game. Duke is a team that likes to throw the ball over the middle of the field. And when they had success against Notre Dame, it was over the middle of the field. But Notre Dame was able to make them less efficient throwing the football. And Duke, but when Duke did find success, as I said, it was over the middle. And so they're going to have to protect it. And when Notre Dame did give up plays over the middle, a lot of times it's because they were blitzing their inside linebackers. They were on plays, they were blitzing their inside backers. And Notre Dame is going to have to be more willing to let their D-line early loose and think through how they're going to pressure Duke or Louisville. You have to get you have to get pressure on the quarterback. There's no doubt about it. But you've got to be able to do it with less guys, because otherwise Louisville is going to have a very intricate plan of attacking you with high lows and slants and ins and unders and all that type of stuff to go right at those zones that you're vacating. And they already do it a ton. It's already who they are. So it's not an adjustment for them to go after what Notre Dame does. And when you look at what Louisville has done in the pass game this year, I mean, they're 5th in yards per attempt, 8th in yards per completion. They're 16th in pass efficiency, as I said before, number 2 in gains of 30 yards or more. Notre Dame ranks 26th in that department defensively. Notre Dame in their pass defense is 4th in fewest yards allowed, 8th in yards allowed per attempt, 5th in touchdowns, which is really impressive when you consider they've played 6 games. Right now, Notre Dame is on pace to only give up 6 touchdown passes for the season. I don't think that'll continue when you look at some of the offenses they played the second half of the year, but they've done a great job of there. 22nd in interceptions, 3rd in pass efficiency defense. But what's the one area from when the ball's being thrown standpoint that Notre Dame's not as good? They rank 57th in most yards allowed per completion. Against this Louisville team, that's the scarier part. That's the scariest part of this matchup is you can shut them down, and then give up a big play. Shut them down, give up a big play. And that's what Louisville wants to do. Notre Dame can't allow that. Yes, they have some advantages on the outside. Their outside corners should be able to keep the outside receivers from Duke in check if they play focus football. But I'm concerned about Notre Dame from the standpoint of the work against the safeties, the linebackers, and the nickel. And not that Thomas Harper. I think Thomas Harper's actually played pretty well this season. There are things Notre Dame does from an alignment standpoint that they just make it harder for him to defend plays. And that was an area where Tariq Bracy got in trouble last year as well. So this is going to be a game where Al Golden's going to have to make some adjustments to what they do allow the D-line to be turned loose more like he did last week, and create more disruptives. I mean, that's the big thing, because the second concerning matchup is Louisville's not great at protecting the quarterback, but Notre Dame's not very good at getting after the quarterback. They rank 108th in the country in sacks per game. Again, that's up a little bit from where it was the previous week because Notre Dame got some sacks last week. Notre Dame had 2 sacks last week, which ties their season high. But even the 2 sacks, they were much more disruptive than 2 sacks last week, and they're going to need to do that again. But it's got to come from turning the defensive line loose, because this is the matchup right here that's going to determine this game. If Notre Dame can't get Plummer out of sync, if Notre Dame can't get him to force a lot of incomplete balls, if Notre Dame can't limit the big plays, then Louisville will be able to score on Notre Dame. They haven't been able. They've kind of kept that in check so far this year. This is the game they can't allow that to get going. And I'm going to tell you right now, the other intriguing part of this matchup is a little bit forward thinking for me, because Lincoln Riley's one of the best offensive minds in college football from a play design standpoint in the pass game. He's excellent. Jeff Brom's in there as well. I mean, he's absolutely in there as well. And so they do it differently, but if you can handle this, it's going to make me feel a lot better about where your pass defense stands heading into next week against USC. And so we're going to learn a whole lot about this matchup. The interesting thing, and this is what USMA was just bringing up in the chat, he says, he's talking about Jordan Botelho. Jordan Botelho is out this weekend. I did do some digging into this. Notre Dame did appeal his ejection, which means for targeting in the second half, which means he has to sit out the first half of this game. That was denied, and so he will sit out. So we will see Josh Burnham and Junior Tuihalamaka on Saturday. I've been told that early in the week that Josh Burnham's kind of been the 1, Tuihalamaka's been the 2, but they're both going to play a bunch, in my opinion, the first half, and they're going to need to play well. And I hope that Botelho being out doesn't force Notre Dame or make Notre Dame feel like they have to now bring pressure and blitz their linebackers and do all that other kind of stuff. And somebody said, of course, it's Notre Dame. Of course, the appeal got denied. The appeal should have got denied. I mean, it's literally by it's one of the very definitions of targeting. You cannot lead with the crown of your helmet, and he led with the crown of his helmet. I mean, he just did. I think it's a dumb rule, but he did. I mean, so there's no grounds for an appeal there, in my opinion. To win, you make the appeal because you never know, but you have to you have to kind of stick with that, a little bit more, in my opinion. So, to me, I want to see them have some faith in Josh Burnham, especially, and Junior Tuihalamaka. I want to see them turn those guys loose. I don't want to get into a situation this week where, Al Golden is so unwilling to play younger guys in the front 7 that he just says, okay, well, since we don't have Jordan Botelho, we're going to do something completely different than who we are. You've got some really talented young players there. Use them, turn them loose. You've got one of the best defensive tackle combinations of college football. Turn them loose. Let them go. And if they're willing to do that, I think Notre Dame can have some success up front in being disruptive, getting Jack Plummer off rhythm, and limiting his ability to hit big plays. Because when you can really get a quarterback out of rhythm, there's going to be a couple times where you actually get beat on the back end, but he can't complete the pass because he can't throw accurately. That's got to happen against good teams. You can't cover them every single time. You've got to work together with your coverage, and your pass rush have to come together and really make it disruptive. And if they can do that, Notre Dame's going to have a lot of success in this matchup. So we're going to go to part 2 of the show here in a second. I need to just do a quick little break. So I'm going to let the music roll here for a minute, but I'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. We've got a whole couple more sections coming up. So don't go anywhere. Before I do, while you're waiting it's going to be about a minute, but while you're waiting, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, and you're going to have time in this little minute to go to boards.irishbreakdown.com and sign up for the message boards. You literally could go there, sign up in the time that it would take for me to come back from this little break. So check that out, and I'll be back here very soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast. All right, we are back for part two of today's midweek rundown. For those of you asking, it was not that kind of break. I sat here the entire time, but been a little under the weather the last couple weeks, and so my throat dries out a little bit faster. So I just needed to recover a little bit for that and get ready for the second part of the show. And in the second part of the midweek rundown, we're going to do what we've done the last few weeks because I really like that segment and you really start kind of diving into the matchup a little bit and you start thinking about, who needs to play well this week for Notre Dame? Who are the players that have to step up and bring their A games this week? And I'm going to start with the Notre Dame offense because this is the side of the ball for Notre Dame that has to step up. The offense it's kind of wild. There's been no in between with this offense this season. They started the season off scoring 40 points in their first four games. First time they've done that in over 100 years, over 120 years. They've scored 40 points or more, 5 straight games, something that's never happened in Notre Dame history. Fast forward 2 weeks later, after Ohio State and Duke, and everybody's worried about, the offense stinks and this coach isn't this and this guy's not that. And it's all, a lot of it's understandable. Some of it's a giant overreaction and teams don't have good games all the time. And no one, even a guy like Caleb Williams, plays great all the time. No pass offense, even USC's plays great all the time. And we saw that last year during Caleb Williams' Heisman season. As great of a player as he was, and he was a great player. When you look at his numbers last year, I mean, he had a game against Oregon State in a game that they won last season 17-14, where he went 16 of 36 and only threw for 180 yards, 5 yards per attempt. 2 weeks later, against Washington State, he goes on 51.7% of his passes for only 188 yards and 2 touchdowns, 6.5 yards per attempt. So it happens. The key, however, is you've got to bounce back. You got to bounce back, and you've got to make the plays that you need to make to be the team that you're capable of being. And right now, Notre Dame is not a team that's – we never said they were going to – a team that's going to go average 46 points per game like they were the first 4 games. They are better than they've shown. And but they're not as bad, or they're better than they've shown last 2 weeks. Not quite as dynamic as the first 4 weeks. The sweet spot is kind of somewhere in the middle, and honestly, the sweet spot is kind of where they are right now from a number standpoint. And they've got to find that sweet spot and play to that on a more consistent basis. Right now, Notre Dame is averaging 36.5 points per game. 36 to 38 is about the minimum of where they should be from a scoring standpoint. Now, when you look at the passing game, overall, the passing numbers look pretty good. You're at 269 yards per game. Sam Hartman's numbers aren't elite. He's averaging 243 yards per game. But again, part of that is what? He played half a game of football against Tennessee State. He didn't play a lot in some of those early season games. So but I still think you need to start relying on him a little bit more. And one of my concerns about this offense early in the year was they didn't throw a ton early, and they were very efficient. But there were even then there were some parts of the field and some areas where they just weren't attacking. And then you look at the last 2 weeks, and all of a sudden now they need the offense to kind of pick up they need the pass game to kind of pick it up a little bit, and it just wasn't there. And so this side of the ball is going to have to play well in a lot of different areas. And so when I look at the players that need to step up the most this week, I'm going to begin with Sam Hartman at quarterback. And this isn't saying that Sam Hartman hasn't played well. It's a statement of, when I say step up, it's not you got to step up because you've been playing poorly. It's you've got to step up, and you've got to step up to the plate in this game, no matter what you've done in the past. In this particular instance, you need to step up in this moment, because Notre Dame is going to need Sam Hartman to, you don't have a lot of faith in your receivers. Okay. And some of your receivers, okay, you do what you need to do during the week to get there. You have the conversations you need to have. You put in the work in the practice field to put the work in to get there, because you're going to need them. And then it's up to those players to step up. But, you need Sam Hartman to be a leader this week. You need Sam Hartman to be a little bit of that kind of that gunslinger he was in the past, while also still protecting the football. Right? You don't want him to have the performance he had against Louisville last year, but you just need to get back to letting him loose a little bit. I feel like in the last couple games, they've held him back a little bit. with some conservative game planning. They took some shots early against Duke on the script, and then after that didn't go back to it. They should have, to be honest with you. They should have taken some more shots in that game. They're going to have to be more aggressive in this game, so Jared Parker's going to have to call a more aggressive game plan, a smart game plan as well, and find the spots that Louisville is vulnerable, and then it's going to be up to Sam Hartman to make those plays and get his offense going. If he gets going this week throwing the football, they're not even going to steamroll Louisville. It's easier said than done, but it's what the end result will be. Because if they can come out early and establish the ability to throw the football on this Louisville team, then it softens them up and they'll run all over this undersized Louisville front. My concern is that they're just going to kind of come out and just try to run it down their throat like they kind of have pretty much every other game. They just kind of come out and run it right up the middle and soften teams up. They've been a couple times that they've been a little bit creative early, Central Michigan, but it's usually been against teams that aren't very good. I want to see them come out, be a little bit more aggressive with their game plan, and Sam Hartman's going to have to execute it early at a very high level. That is key. Lamreck just kind of mentioned it as well. This is part of my breakdown as well, and he just said it, talking about on first down. The pass game on first down is going to have to be utilized and be effective. That's a big part of this game because you want to be able to say, hey, you've got to run the ball, you've got to pass the ball more on early downs, and that's true, but you can't do it in a week where you're only completing 50% of your passes because you can't put yourself in a ton of 2nd and 10 situations in this game. Especially early because look, y'all, Louisville is going to dictate their entire game plan around stopping the running game. It's not a lack of respect for Sam Hartman. It's a lack of respect for Sam Hartman's weapons. And I've always said this, it's a little easier to defend a tight end with a game plan geared towards stopping the run than it is receivers. And so coming out in this game, Notre Dame's going to have to find a way to have an efficient pass game, but also a downfield pass game. More RPOs. Be more willing to use some of the quick stuff to the perimeter. Work the middle of the field. Do more concepts to get guys on the run, and the receivers have to play with more urgency. But at the end of the day, it all comes down to Sam Hartman's got to make the reads. He's got to make the throws because they're going to need him to play at a high level. And if he does, this game is not going to be close. I'm just telling you, if Sam Hartman comes out there and they let him loose, number one, and he rewards them with that, number two, this offense is going to have a fun day, a really good day on Saturday night. There's no doubt. Number two, the second offensive group that really needs to step up. It's an interior of the Notre Dame offensive line. This has been the most schizophrenic unit that Notre Dame's had this season so far. I really believe that. There have been times this season where this unit has been really good. Ohio State being arguably their best game. The problem is it's been way too inconsistent so far. Way too inconsistent. I've said it a million times. As a quarterback and with your run game, you can't thrive if you're not winning the battle up the middle. Just can't. Duke dominated Notre Dame up the middle last week. Dominated. And Notre Dame is going to have to come out and be better up the middle in this game. Louisville's not real big on the outside, up the middle. We talked about this earlier in the week. When you look at their depth chart, they have a somewhat smallish interior defensive line. Their starting defensive lineman or Des Tell, who's kind of their nose tackle. He's 6'1", 290. His backup is Tafik Thomas. He's 6'4", 300, decent size. Their other starting defensive tackles, Ramon Puryear, 6'3", 270. A quick penetrator. His backup is Jeff Clark, 6', 290. They just don't have a ton of beef. They've got some kids like deeper down the depth chart that have some size. Those guys don't play a ton. And so this is going to be an undersized defensive unit. When you look on the edge, it's not a whole lot different on the edge either. Louisville's Ashton Gillette is 6'3", 270. Decent-sized kid. But then you look on the other side, and Stephen Heron, is 6'4", 240. And so there's not a lot of size there, but they're quick, they're disruptive, they get after it. They really get after it. Now, I could see a scenario in this game where they look at how Notre Dame played on Saturday and say, hey, we've got to get some of our bigger boys in the field. So they've got to get Jared Dawson on the field more. They've got to get Jermaine Lowell on the field more. They may decide to do that, but that's kind of getting away from who they are. And I don't know that going away from who you are is always the best strategy for playing against a football team. So maybe they'll do that a little bit on early downs and then get their more athletic guys in the second half. But either way, those guys are second and third teamers on Louisville's team. Just because they're bigger, doesn't mean they're Dwayne Carter and Jameon Franklin, right? Either way, the interior of the offensive line, especially the guards, have got to play better. Because if you notice, when the guards struggle, Zeke struggles. And that's just kind of how it goes. If the guys beside the center are getting their butts kicked, it's a lot harder for the center to play at a high level unless he's just an elite player. So when you look at this scenario, or this matchup, the interior offensive line has to play better. And it's gonna be tough for this offense to really get going if they don't. So a lot on the shoulders of Pat Coogan and Rocco Spindler and Zeke Correll this week. They have to play at a high level. And then the number 3 matchup for me, or the number 3 step-up time guys for me, it's going to be the same as last week. And I'm going to just keep having these guys on there till either A, they're given the opportunity to make more plays, or B, they make more plays when those opportunities come, and it's not the same for each guy. And that's Chris Tyree and Tobias Merriweather. You're not at the point yet, in my opinion, and I think if Notre Dame does this, it's a mistake for depth reasons, for talent reasons, for a lot of reasons, to just brush Tobias Merriweather aside. It's not the time for that. However, he can't keep playing like he's playing. He can't. He's going to have to start making more plays. He's going to have to start playing with more urgency. He's going to have to start playing with more assertiveness. He's going to have to start making plays and playing smarter. He has too much talent to be playing the way he's playing. And I know how it is for fans. Guy doesn't play well for a few games, and you want him to get his scholarship removed and never play another down. I get all that. That's why you're fans, and that's why the coaches, because you can't make emotional reactions like that. However, you also can't just keep trotting a guy out there that's not making plays. You can't do it. And so this is a bit of a make or break time to me for Tobias Merriweather for this season. It's never make or break for your career when you're just a sophomore. But you're getting to the point in time where it's like, okay, Tobias, when are you going to step up? When are you going to be that guy? We need you. And that's as I said yesterday, that's the conversation I'm having, Tobias. I'm not yelling at him. I'm not screaming at him. I don't think it's a lack of effort. I don't think he wants to not play well. I don't think he's, a bad kid with a bad attitude or any of those things. It's just he's not playing well. And so he's a young guy and didn't play a whole lot last year. You got to sit him down and say, hey, look, man, here's where it's at. We need you. We can't be the team we're capable of being without you playing better. And then you challenge them and say, I'm going to be on you all week. We'll be on you all week, man. I'm going to make sure I'm going to have my foot up your you-know-what all week because I need you to respond to the challenge that I'm giving you and step up and play better. Because if Tobias can start being the guy that I know he can be, this offense is incredibly hard to stop. And that's where the focus needs to be, because you all can say, hey, dismiss him and all that. Who are you going to put there? Who are you going to put there that has that type of skill set? There is nobody else left there. And so they're going to have to get him going. There's only so much they can do. Part of this also then comes down to Tobias, because last week against Duke, they designed stuff early for Tobias. They called a play for him late. Both times, he didn't make the play. First time, yeah, ball was a little long. Lay out. Go give me some for it. Accelerate out of your break. Go get the ball. I just need you to go get that ball. The deep ball late in the game, I need him to make that play. He's too good not to make that play. So that's where it comes down to is, yeah, the coach has got to, mentally get him right and put him in a position, make sure they're using routes to play to his skill set and all those type of things. But Tobias has got to make those plays. And he's had opportunities this year. I mean, there are times this season where it's like, dude, they're not even looking at Tobias. But then the other times you're like, hey, they threw him the ball and he didn't make the play. He's got to go make the play. This is the game. He's got to step up and go make the plays. And they're going to need him, because this offense just can't be as good as it's capable of being without him playing well. It just can't. It can still be good. But if you look at beating USC's and beating the Clemsons and beating the Texas and the Washingtons and the Georgias and the Michigans, and if you get a rematch against Ohio State, you're going to need him. You're flat out going to need him. So this is a step-up time for him, because you can't toss him aside. But there does come a point in time where it's like, we just can't keep doing this. And so it's up to Tobias to say, no more of this. And I want to see that from him this week because if the light goes on for Tobias, as I said, this offense becomes scary. Chris Tyree's situation is different. He's caught every pass that they've thrown to him this year. It's just they're not throwing enough balls to him, to be completely honest with you. And so to me, it's been strange because we talked about in fall camp how, man, like Sam Hartman and Chris Tyree get connected a lot in practice. I mean, it's like they were forcing Chris Tyree to get the football. The problem is when you get into games, Sam Hartman doesn't look for him as much. And part of that is because it's obvious the way that Sam Hartman's going through his progressions that Chris Tyree is a secondary read. He's part of your secondary read package. They're going to have to find some things to get him going. He's got too much big playability. He's averaging over 20 yards a catch this season. He's had plenty of big plays this year so far. I mean, big 3rd and 9 conversion early against Central Michigan. He has the 25-yard gain to get them out from being backed up against Ohio State. He had the big play against NC State where he broke free on a scramble play. He had the long touchdown pass against Central Michigan. And the guy's got big playability, and he's been a good 3rd down guy as well when you've actually gotten him the football. So Notre Dame is going to have to find ways to make Chris Tyree a bigger part of the offense. And I don't know that they're going to do it. I really don't. There's no evidence that they're going to do it, but they need to. They need to have him doing more things. They need to utilize his speed. We have seen in the past when Chris Tyree is moving a lot before the snap, and you've shown at least a threat to get him the ball in certain ways, he can do things with the football. And so, well, he's not a make you miss guy. I don't need to be a make you miss guy. On a reverse, I don't need to make anybody miss. Catch the ball and run as fast as you can to the outside because nobody runs faster than him, in my opinion. So there are things that you have to use him more to do because if you can hit him with a jet, if you can hit him with a reverse, if you can do something on a screen to where you can spring him free for a couple big plays, now all of a sudden when you start running him back and forth on those plays, even when he's not getting the ball, you've got to worry about him. And when you worry about him, now all of a sudden I'm not quite as focused on Audric Estime as I need to be. I'm not quite as focused on Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price and Jabron Payne as I need to be, on Sam Hartman as I need to be, on Mitchell Evans as I need to be. And so it can have a big impact on Notre Dame's offense if they can just find ways. And again, I'm not talking about getting him, 5 catches every game and 10 catches every game. I've said this, 5 to 6 touches per game. It's catches and jets and handoffs and reverses and shovels and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of different ways to do it. You got to get it done. And so they're going to have to find ways to get Chris Tyree more involved in this offense. Absolutely do. And also, especially if you get him on some of the shorter stuff, some of the more speedy stuff, the crossers, the overs, the drags and things like that. If you can hit a couple of those, and Chris has to learn to accelerate a little bit more out of some of his cuts. That's still part of his evolution as a receiver. I want to see him accelerate a little bit more on some of that stuff. But if you can find ways to get Chris Tyree the football with vertical creases or perimeter edges, he can be dangerous. He can be real dangerous. And so that's another guy to me that needs to step up for the Notre Dame offense if they're going to really break out and get going this weekend against Louisville. Let's talk about the Notre Dame defense in this matchup and who really needs to step up for the Notre Dame defense. And I'm going to go completely different directions this week. I'm not going to talk about Howard Cross and Riley Mills. I'm not talking about Maris Luafau and J.D. Bertrand. Those are givens. Those guys have to play well. I've always said this. You can't be great. You guys notice I talk about the middle a lot because I believe that. You can't be dominant on defense if you can't dominate up the middle. You can't be a great offense if you can't be effective up the middle. And I believe that's true no matter what offense you run. If you're a team that wants to throw the ball 50 times, if you're getting your butt kicked right up the middle and they're getting pressure on your quarterback right up the middle, you're going to struggle. So the middle of the field is important. So of course those guys have to play well. So I'm going to go a different direction from those guys. And the number one guy to me that has to step up and have a big week is Thomas Harper. Thomas Harper has been a little up and down at times this season, but overall I've liked what I've seen from him for the most part. When you look at how he's performed this season. He's given up some plays and some clutch moments, and I know that that's kind of what people focus on. I get it. But overall, I think Thomas Harper's been pretty good, pretty solid this season. And he's been very good at certain things. And some of the certain things he's been very good at are going to be especially important when you are facing this Louisville team. And one of the things that Louisville is going to do a lot in the pass game is they're going to do a lot of quick throws, now screens, bubble screens, tunnel screens, slant routes, quick in cuts, a lot of things that put a lot of stress on the nickel defender. I fully anticipate Notre Dame playing a lot of nickel this week. I expect to see Thomas Harper be playing a lot. I don't think he's done anything not to play. I think he's been pretty good as a perimeter defender, and he's been really good at blowing up these things. And so if your concern is about Thomas Harper covering down the field, okay, we can have a conversation about that. I think he's actually been pretty decent. He gave up a couple big plays against Ohio State, but a lot of people get beat by Emeka Egbuka and Julian Fleming. But outside of that, it's been pretty darn good in other instances. So this week for Thomas Harper, this is a Thomas Harper game, in my opinion, with all the quick stuff that they do, the perimeter runs they can do, because this is the stuff where he thrives. Coming up, blowing up screens, blowing up the lead blockers on perimeter throws and perimeter runs. You're going to need him to play at a high level there. And then he's got to be better at playing the inside breaking routes in the pass game. If he can improve in that area, and part of it is the coaching staff needs to help him improve by just his sheer alignment can help him be more effective in those regards by just not giving away the inside just by how he lines up. That's going to make him more effective. But when I'm looking at it here, it's not just coverage, but he's got a chance to be incredibly disruptive on the edge as a perimeter run defender and a perimeter screen defender against a team that likes to run a lot of perimeter screens and runs. The other part is I believe this is a game where I would absolutely be willing to use him on a couple fires off the edge, especially when Louisville likes to go, with their four wides. You can kind of get a read on what their protection is going to be. And I think a well-timed and well-designed rover fire, nickel fire, could get to Jack Plummer a couple times in this game. I really do. And so I'd like to see that as well. So I think Thomas Harper is a kid that could have a chance to have a big impact in this game if he steps up and plays well. And I don't know. I just kind of have a feeling like he's going to make some big plays in this game. I do. And I could be completely wrong, but I've just kind of all week I'm thinking about this game and thinking about the matchup. And I've just kind of had this vibe of just all week of kind of like, man, I really feel like this is a week where he's going to make some things happen. We'll see if he does, but I just kind of have got that vibe from looking at this matchup. Number 2, right? Next man in type of mentality, right? Jordan Patel is going to be out the first half of this game. He's been a pretty good run defender so far this season, not much in the pass rush. He's going to be replaced by 2 guys, and one of which I'm going to really focus on here, and that's Josh Burnham. This is a big opportunity for Josh Burnham. You should be playing more, flat out. I mean, to me, it's maddening. It's frustrating. There's just no reason that Josh Burnham has not played more this season. We're 6 games into the season, and Josh Burnham has only played 71 snaps. That's, to me, a problem. He played 30 in the first 2 games, and in the first 2 games, he had 4 hurries in the first 4 games on only 9 pass rushes. That's it. He had 5 run stops on only 20 run snaps. That's an incredible rate. And then he didn't play a whole lot the next 3 games. And then he only played 4 snaps against Ohio State, had a stop in that game, had a tackle in that game. And then against Duke, he only played 16 snaps because Jordan Patel got kicked out. And so he's got a chance now. It's like, hey, no excuse not to play him now. And so you get him in the game, and this is a chance for him to step up and say, man, you're starter in this game, so you need to play like one. There's no, hey, you're just a sophomore. This is a kid that I have said in the past is pound for pound the most explosive athlete they have on defense, and that's my opinion. I believe that to be true. He's going to get his chance to come off the edge in this game, and he needs to step up and play well. He needs to be disciplined and not, it's one thing to come off the edge. It's another thing to come off the edge with purpose. And coming off the edge of purpose and with a plan is how you get sacks, but also how you make sure that when you're not getting a sack, the quarterback's not stepping up inside of you or rolling outside of you and making plays. And that hurt Notre Dame a little bit last week. So this is a huge opportunity for Josh Burnham to step up. And the goal is like Vince had made a Wally Pipp comment. And for those of you who don't know, that's the guy who the story goes, basically, to make it short, he took a day off and let a young guy play that day because he needed a day of rest, and that young guy happened to be Lou Gehrig. And of course, he never got a spot back. So there's, you got Wally Pipped is an expression. Well, that's not what I want to happen in this game. I don't want it to be where, Jordan Botelho kick you to the curb because Josh Burnham played great. My hope is that Josh steps up and plays great for two reasons. One, because you're going to need him against this Louisville offense. They're going to run at Josh. They're going to, they're going to think they can drop back and throw the football and not get as much pressure because he's in the game. At least that's what teams usually do when there's a young guy on the field like that. Josh needs to play well to help them win. Number two, if Josh plays at a high level in this game, that means production plus discipline, then there's no excuse not to play him more moving forward. And I've said before, one of the reasons that I believe Jordan Botelho hasn't quite been as effective rushing the quarterback is because I believe he's playing too much. And this is going to give you a chance to get him in the game a little less, which helps keep him fresher in the later parts of the season and later parts of the game. So I want Jordan Botelho to come back and be strong when he gets back in the second half. I want him to come back and be that guy at Viper that we all hope he can be, that's good against the run, that can be a dynamic pass rusher, but not maybe at 15, 20 snaps less a game to help keep him fresh. But this is the game where Josh Burnham needs to step up and do that. And Al Gold needs to get out of his own way and not overthink this like he did the middle linebacker situation against Central Michigan, where they put Jack Kaiser there instead of Drake Bowen and Jaden Alsbury. Huge missed opportunity for that game. They can't make that same mistake this week with Josh Burnham. But Josh Burnham, when that moment comes, has got to step up and he's got to play well. And I don't care what the circumstances is that got you here. The fact is, you're here. It's time to go step up and make plays. So they're going to need him to make plays. And then my third guy is DJ Brown. Here's why I think DJ Brown is a big player this week. It's twofold. One is a negative, one is a positive. Here's the negative. I always get concerned about teams that attack their safeties with speed, and I get concerned about teams that get their skill players in space against the Notre Dame safeties, and especially against DJ Brown. Smart kid, great attitude, great effort, just not a dynamic athlete. And so when he's forced to cover deep, it can be a problem. And when he's put in space as a tackler throughout his career, it's been a problem. He's going to have to make sure he's getting to where he's supposed to be quickly with sound technique and get there when the ball gets there. Because if you're getting there when the ball gets there, then they can't run on you. He's going to have to tackle well. He's going to have to be good in space. He can't have the missed tackles that he's had in the past. They need DJ to be better there. Here's the counter argument. Coach Freeman said something in the game, in the press conference on Monday, that I don't quite agree with. And the comment had something to do with, Jack Plummer's not really a guy that you can confuse. And I understand what he's saying. Jack Plummer's been around for a while. Jack Plummer's a veteran guy. He was a starting quarterback for Jeff Brom at Purdue. He was a starting quarterback last year against Notre Dame. He was a starting quarterback for Cal. He's got a lot of experience, a lot of snaps under his belt as a quarterback in the college football level. If you look at his numbers this season, he's obviously passing for a lot of yards this year. He's averaging 281 yards per game so far this season. He averaged 257.9 last year, threw for over 3,000 yards at Cal. He threw for 938 yards or 864 yards in 2021, 938 in 3 games in 2020. And he threw for 1,600 yards in 2019. So Jack Plummer's played a lot of football in his career. And so I understand where Coach Freeman is coming from as far as the experience, but I actually think you can confuse Jack Plummer. And we've seen it. We've seen good teams do it. Good teams do it. NC State did it. And Georgia Tech also did it. And Georgia Tech gave up some yards to Jack Plummer. There's no doubt about that. He passed for 3 touchdowns, 247 yards, but it was one of his least effective games of the year. He completed 58.1% of his passes, threw for 247 yards. That he had some deep shots down the field, but overall he wasn't great in that game. They ran the ball well in that game, and he threw a pick up the seam where they kind of robbed a safety down, undercut a seam route, and he didn't see it, and he picked it off. Indiana, he threw a 85-yard touchdown pass against Indiana early. Only threw for 238 yards in that game. 1 touchdown, so went 13 of 23. So we've actually seen some defenses give him problems, and Notre Dame is going to have to be able to do that. Last week against NC State, he threw for a bunch of yards, 286 yards, but he threw 2 picks. I think he is a guy that you can confuse. And DJ Brown has been very good at reading, how they use him, number one, but he's been very good at reading quarterbacks. And so we don't see it a lot on film or on TV because it's just often not on the screen. But him taking away certain routes by getting underneath routes or getting over top of routes properly. And he's going to have to be really good in those areas. And then also, I think he's a guy that you can use to where he can read the quarterback effectively and get underneath balls and knock some balls down and pick them off. And you saw him. This is exactly what he did against Ohio State late in the game. He just didn't make the play. But up until the point of where he dropped the ball, that was a great play by DJ Brown. He's just got to finish it. He's got to finish it. And that's where I think you can use him effectively in this game against Plummer, because I think DJ is a guy that you can maybe steal a turnover with because of how smart he is. He's good at disguising things. He's good at timing things up because he is a very smart football player. But you're also going to need him to make sure he's not getting beat because of the lack of athleticism. So this is a big game for DJ. I think he's a guy that has a chance to really impact this game one way or the other. Notre Dame needs him to impact it positively. They need his mind to be a big factor in this game and not his athleticism or lack thereof compared to other top-level safeties. And so DJ Brown is another player that I think could have a huge impact in this game. So offensively, it's Sam Hartman, interior offensive line, and then at receiver, Chris Tyree and Tobias Merriweather are all step-up players for the Notre Dame offense. And then defensively, it's Thomas Harper, it's Josh Burnham, and it's DJ Brown. That's my breakdown for guys that need to step up for the Notre Dame defense in this game. And if those guys all play well, then Notre Dame will have a shot to win this game and win it convincingly. There's no doubt in my mind that Notre Dame is a better team than Louisville and a much better team than Louisville, but they also should have beat Duke by more than a touchdown. They should not have needed a fourth quarter comeback against Duke to win that game. I'm happy they did. They learned something, and now it's about building on it and making sure that it doesn't happen again. And going on the road and really taking Louisville's soul early. And all those guys have a chance to do that and make the kind of big plays needed to do that. And I'm excited to see what they can do. So third part of my breakdown today is going to be about quarterbacks. We had a very interesting conversation the other day about on the board, and it started on the show and then continued on to the board. And it's about what should Notre Dame do at quarterback in 2024. My first answer is, why are we worried about what Notre Dame is going to do at quarterback in 2024? Right now, I'm worried about what Notre Dame's going to do at quarterback at Louisville. However, I know it's something that people like to talk about, and it is an interesting topic. And so I'm going to embrace that topic, and I'm going to talk about that here today as we end the show. Reminder before we do this as well that there is going to be no mailbag today. So if you have something you want me to answer today, if you're a message board member, go put it on the board. If you're not and you want it, or even if you're a message board member but you want an answer right now on the show, you want to throw up a super chat. But otherwise, we're going to talk about this last topic and then we're gonna get out of here. But here's the deal. This is an interesting situation because Notre Dame finds itself in a very unique situation at quarterback. And the situation is, for right now, you're good. For the 2023 season, barring injury, you're good. Sam Hartman's a really good quarterback. And you've got 6 games here now moving forward to really get him rolling offensively. He hasn't been turned loose the way that he needs to the last 2 games. Right now, Sam Hartman's actually on pace for under 3,000 yards for the regular season. That needs to change. He needs to get going, and that's more of a coaching thing than it is a Sam Hartman thing. And it's also, he threw for 197 yards. It was 190-something yards against Tennessee State in the halftime. He didn't play. He would have thrown for 400 yards that game if he'd have played the whole game. So he's obviously your guy for this year. And you look at your recruiting in recent seasons, and Notre Dame has really stepped up its recruiting at quarterback. And this is the funny thing, and I've made this comment a couple times, but it really is fascinating, because there's 2 realities that we all have to embrace about Marcus Freeman's tenure as the head football coach at Notre Dame. That, to me, make it just a really fascinating discussion. And here's the 2 realities. Number 1, I would argue no position has seen a bigger upgrade on the recruiting trail since Marcus Freeman took over than quarterback. I'm not ready to say that they've recruited quarterback better than every other position, although you could make that argument. You could absolutely make that argument, in my opinion. I'm simply going to say that no position, because this is one I think is not really debatable. You could say that no position has seen a bigger upgrade on the trail from where it was in recent seasons than quarterback. And so I think that's an impressive fact. It's been with now 2 coaches. Obviously, Tommy Rees played a role in getting Kenny Minchey to Notre Dame, and a huge role in getting CJ Carr to Notre Dame. Gino Guidugli's done a good job in keeping in CJ Carr here, but obviously, he was here, he was committed before. But then Coach Guidugli goes out and gets a huge win on the recruiting trail by getting Deuce Knight at quarterback, and that's a huge commitment because he's got tons of talent, tons of potential. He's had a very weird junior year. I'm going to show some of his highlights from an earlier game this year before he went back to Mississippi. Against IMG, where I was very impressed by what I saw from Deuce in that game against one of the best high school teams in the country. And so that's a great win. But you look at the current situation, and you look at the 2024 season, and Notre Dame is sort of in it's a win now mode, right? And they're not a team that should be in a situation, especially with Marcus Freeman going into his 3rd year, where it's hey, look, it's year 3, but we're just going to kind of take this year and just be okay, because we're gonna sacrifice this season to develop a young quarterback. That's what we're gonna do. You can't do that, but you also can't get into the mode where you just automatically look for the portal guy, because this is an argument that some people have made. Well, you can't take the risk of developing a young quarterback. Well, if you're going to take that stance, then basically what you're doing is you're guaranteeing that the portal is the only way to go from now until eternity, because every quarterback at some point in time is an unproven player you've got to take some level of a chance on. Jameis Winston was that way before he played. Tim Tebow was that way before he played. Bryce Young was that way before he played. Trevor Lawrence was that way before he played. At some point in time, you've got to say, hey, we've got this really talented kid. We've got to develop him and coach him up, and we've got to give him that chance to go out there and play. And so I get the mindset of you don't sacrifice seasons to develop players. Totally on board with that. But I also believe that you can't just go through life and as a program and say, hey, we can't put an inexperienced quarterback out there against our schedule because we can't guarantee we're going to win. You have to be willing to recruit the right players. You have to be willing to develop those players, and then you have to show some faith in those players. And that's where Notre Dame is going to have to be. But it is a legitimate question about, is it next year that you show that faith, or is it 2025 that you show that faith? And that's where I think the argument can get very interesting, because like for me, I'll say this. I think CJ Carr mentally is a kid that could play as a freshman. Will CJ Carr be ready physically as a freshman? I don't know the answer to that, but I'm not betting against him. I also am very high on Kenny Minchey. You all know this. I had Kenny Minchey as a top 100 player in high school when he was still committed to Pitt, way before we thought Notre Dame had any shot with him. So he's a kid that I think has a ton of potential. Deuce Knight has the highest ceiling of a quarterback that Notre Dame has landed in a while. But then you have to ask the question of, are you willing to take a gamble either on a redshirt freshman at Kenny Minchey, who may only have 2 career pass attempts by that point in time, or a true freshman in CJ Carr, who will have 0 career pass attempts at that time, or do you go to the portal? And I don't think it's an easy answer. I know some people think it's an easy answer. Oh, you go to the portal. It's no brainer. You can't take a risk. Okay, that sounds great on a message board, but that's not necessarily practical way to build your team. And you say, well, Lincoln Riley does it. Well, Lincoln Riley can get away with it because of what he's developed. And the reality is for all the people that like to point out how many transfer quarterbacks he had success with, you got to remember, he didn't take those guys as graduates. He took Baker Mayfield when he had like 3 years of eligibility left in college. He took Baker was a 3-year starter at Oklahoma. And again, this is pre-COVID, so it's not like Baker had a COVID year. You know, Baker Mayfield started for 3 years at Oklahoma. He was not a guy that just went there and was a senior. He'd established himself. You know, Baker had played at Texas Tech two years before and then had to sit out a year in redshirt, threw for 2,300 yards and 12 touchdowns and 9 picks. But he was a guy that developed there. Kyler Murray is a guy that was a freshman at Texas A&M, played, started some games, and then transferred to Oklahoma, sat behind Baker Mayfield for a couple seasons, and then took over as a starting quarterback. It was not a situation where Kyler Murray played somewhere else, developed somewhere else, came in as a 5th-year guy and started. He was developed there. He was in the line of succession. The only true transfer that he's taken like that, he's had one, and that is Jalen Hurts, because there was no line of succession. The next year he goes out and he's got Spencer Rattler, and then the next year who he recruited. The next year he's got Caleb Williams, who he recruited. And then you look at what he's done at USC. He had a transfer, but it's a transfer he recruited. The perception is completely different. So there is not a perception that Lincoln Riley is just going to keep replacing you with transfer quarterbacks. That's not the reality of how he got his transfer quarterbacks. He's done that once. So, and also he's developed 3 number 1 picks will most likely be 3 number 1 picks after Caleb Williams, whenever Caleb Williams comes out. I see Baker Mayfield's number 1 pick, Kyler Murray's number 1 pick, Jalen Hurts was the number 2 pick. And let's be honest, Jalen Hurts got drafted that high more so by what he did developing as a passer at Oklahoma than what he did at Alabama. And so to me, just big picture, no context, it's not an easy answer. Here's the other part of this conversation that makes it more challenging and changes the dynamic. Too many of us, when we have this conversation, we're still living in the reality of a 4-team playoff. And in a 4-team playoff, you're almost forced, if you're Notre Dame, to go get a transfer quarterback because you cannot afford to lose the opener to Texas A&M. You can't. When you've got USC coming up and some of the other challenging games, you can't necessarily do that. We have to put our best foot forward as a team. And the last time Notre Dame went with a young, unproven quarterback situation, it bit them in the butt hard. And that was 2022. However, they're in a much better situation now. And at least they will be in 2024 when CJ Carr shows up, to where the talent level's better. Steve Angeli is going to be a junior by then. Kenny Minchey will be a redshirt sophomore, and he's got way more talent than Drew Pine, and he's a much more natural passer than Tyler Buchner, although Tyler Buchner is obviously a more dynamic player. But Kenny's a much more natural passer than Tyler was. And then you'll have CJ Carr, who's a significantly better prospect than Drew Pine was, and is a significantly better passer than Tyler Buchner was coming out of high school. So they're different players than what Notre Dame had last year. But again, I go back to the point of next year begins the 12-team playoff, which means you can afford to maybe catch an early season L if you think that the development will allow you by October to win big. That's the question. So then you get into a situation of, okay, do you go get a portal guy? Because I think they will go to the portal one way or the other. Do you go to a portal guy that you say, hey, listen, you're a veteran guy. We like you. You're going to be a leader. You're going to come in here and compete, but we're going to give these young guys every chance in the world to be the starter. Maybe it's they start game one. Maybe you start in game one, and we're going to kind of do the Trevor Lawrence, Kelly Bryant thing where we're going to bring him along slowly, but once he's ready, he's the guy. And I think Trevor Lawrence's first start in college, I believe, was game 4 or 5. I'm actually going to go look that up because it was actually against Syracuse back in 2018, so it was game 5. Kelly Bryant started the first 4 games of that year. Trevor Lawrence started game 5, and then he got knocked out of that game, and the backup quarterback had to come off the bench and rally him to Chase Bryce had to come off the bench and rally them to a victory. And then, of course, the rest is history. Trevor has a great year, and they win a national championship. But there was a plan to bring him along slowly behind a veteran. Do you do that with a Steve Angeli? Do you do that with a Kenny Minchey if you think CJ Carr's the guy? Do you do that with Steve Angeli if you think Kenny Minchey or CJ Carr's the guy? That's a different question. Or do you bring a portal guy in, let the young guys know what the plan is, and then start your portal guy until he gets there? Or is there a portal guy that makes it worth it? And that to me this is where I'm at. I believe Notre Dame should bring a portal quarterback in next year. I'm not yet certain on what type of portal quarterback there should be for 2 reasons. Number one, I've said this before. I'm going to stick with it, so I'm not going to belabor the point. And it's hard for me. You all know that. But if it depends on Kenny Minchey's development. If Kenny Minchey really takes a jump between now and December, and you think that give me a spring and this kid could be ready to take over, then you roll with the kid you have. And if you go to the portal, you bring in a veteran that's going to be just a backup, just in case type of player. And I'm fine with that. Because between Kenny and Steve Angeli and CJ Carr, if Kenny makes that big jump, I'm comfortable with where Notre Dame is because Kenny can be that guy. And if Kenny falters, you either have Steve Angeli, who's the solid veteran who can take over until CJ Carr is ready, or you get a portal guy to be that guy. The other part is if Kenny doesn't develop, then you almost have to go to the portal for a starter. If you don't have faith in Kenny Minchey taking a jump between December and September or really late August of next year, then the reality is you've got to go to the portal because you can't assume that a freshman who's still in high school is going to be that guy. You have to go to the portal, and then if CJ becomes that guy, then you make that move, right? I personally would love to see Kenny Minchey get that chance to develop, and then CJ also come along next season. But you're going to need some depth there because you're also going to need to go to the portal because if Kenny Minchey beats out Steve Angeli in the spring, for example, is it a guarantee that Steve Angeli stays? I hope he does. I really do hope he does. But it's not a given in today's era. So you also have to bring a portal guy in just for depth purposes in case somebody leaves, even if you have all the confidence in the world. But it's going to change what kind of portal guy you have. But here's the big caveat, and here's what could potentially change things. Who are the available portal quarterbacks? And what is your thought of them as players? Because I can sit here and say, and you could sit here and say, well, to me, I'm not bringing in a portal guy because I think Kenny Minchey's got all the talent in the world. I agree. Man, I'm not going to the portal because between Kenny Minchey and CJ Carr, you got all the talent to be a big-time quarterback next year. I agree. In theory, I agree. In that instance, you bring in a quality player. And somebody asked about a Jack Cohn type. No, because Jack Cohn's going somewhere to start. I'm thinking more of a Chase Bryce, a guy like him if he had eligibility. A Tristan Gebbia, a guy like Oregon State, a kid that started at Oregon State, not that good. Ohio State brought him in just to give depth. A guy that maybe wants to get into coaching, something along those lines. So that kind of guy is someone I would want to bring in that type of situation. a guy who wants to compete for the starting job, but will be okay being a great leader if he doesn't get it. That kind of player. But what if we get into a situation and the guys in the portal, there are big time players that have interest in Notre Dame? Because what we have to also realize is Sam Hartman has changed the game a lot. And it's not just that he's changed the game because of success he's having on the field. I would argue they need to let him loose a little bit more and put up even better numbers. That's my argument. The other part of it is, the bigger part of it is, Sam Hartman has shown that you can come to Notre Dame and be a star from a perception standpoint and make a lot of money. Let's be real. The vast majority of the deals that Sam Hartman has got as an NIL guy, and Sam Hartman's making a lot of money right now as an NIL spokesman. How much of that do you really think he has if he's staying still at Wake Forest? Let's be honest about that. How much of that do you think he has if he's a 5th-round draft pick in the NFL? You want to know why Sam Hartman didn't go in the NFL? Part of it's for draft purposes, but here's the reality. There's no way he was going to make as much money in the NFL next year or the next 3 years as he's going to make in 1 year at Notre Dame. It's just a reality. That's something that a lot of people thought was there. There's a lot of people that didn't realize that, oh, you can't make money at Notre Dame. Notre Dame doesn't embrace NIL, and I've said that's false. Notre Dame doesn't embrace NIL for high school kids. They've certainly embraced NIL for their current players. Kyle Hamilton made a lot of money at Notre Dame. Michael Mayer made a lot of money at Notre Dame. Sam Hartman's making a lot of money at Notre Dame. The difference is Sam Hartman's okay talking about it and letting Notre Dame do some of the things that he's doing with the Beats headphones for the team, the slides for the team, and all these different things he's doing. It's much more out there now. And that's letting people know. And Caleb Williams said it, has reportedly his dad has said it. I don't know. They say he said it. I don't know that it's Caleb that said that. I think Caleb's more focused on Arizona right now and his opponents and that stuff. Is let his dad handle that. It's just fine. It's his dad's job. Look, I could go to the NFL next year and make X amount of dollars, or I could stay in college one more year and make even more dollars and perhaps improve my draft stock. So Sam Hartman has changed the game for Notre Dame in a lot of ways. So when quarterbacks hit the portal next year, they're going to have this young, charismatic coach who is currently winning a lot of games, and hopefully that continues. A lot of kids want to play for him. The current kids like playing for him a lot. And you've got a quarterback that has become a spotlight guy, going from a non-spotlight school to a spotlight school. He's handled it well, making a lot of money. If there are big-time guys that jump in the portal next year, Notre Dame is going to be a place that they're going to want to look at. Now, some of those guys are going to want guaranteed money, and that's fine. And if they want that, then you let them go wherever they get guaranteed money. There's going to be others that are smarter, because guys like that aren't smart to me. There's going to be other guys that are smarter. They're going to say, hey, look, I want to go win a championship. I want to improve my draft stock, but I also want to make a lot of money. And that's where Notre Dame comes into the equation. So then you say, well, what if a Riley Leonard jumps in the portal? I have to rethink my strategy. What if a guy like a Sam Hartman from this year, a Bo Nix from a couple years ago, Michael Penix, what if a guy like that jumps in the portal and he likes Notre Dame? All bets are off at that point in time, because that's the kind of program changer that you understand. Hey, Kenny, hey, CJ, I need you to sit for one more year because we got a chance to go get this guy. If they don't understand it, then they will be unhappy and they'll leave. Most likely they'll understand it and know that they're going to get their chance to battle. So to me, that's the thing that has to be kept into consideration as well. You don't necessarily have to say, hey, man, we need a portal guy to be able to say that dude's in the portal. He likes us. We got to make it happen. But barring that happening, my personal preference as of right now is to develop the younger players, because you have done such a job recruiting that position in recent years that I think you need to, you kind of owe it to yourself to do that. And we've talked a lot about CJ Carr in recent years. I'm going to actually bring up some film of Deuce Knight against IMG here while we're talking, because I know not all of you have seen Deuce so far as a junior. I thought he did some really good things in this game. You've got Deuce Knight coming down the pike in a couple years. CJ has put in a lot of work as a recruiter for Notre Dame. Deuce is already putting in a lot of work as a recruiter for Notre Dame. You've got Kenny Minchie that to me throws a gorgeous ball. I really like Kenny Minchie's ability to throw the football. And the other thing about Kenny too, which is why I'm more prone to say, hey, you've got to coach this kid up, is because one of the reputations Kenny had coming out of high school, when you look at the Elite 11 stuff and people that talk to him, I had a Notre Dame coach tell me, this is one of the smartest kids I've ever met when it comes to just knowledge of the game and instincts and things along those lines. And so when you combine that with his frame, because he's got a bigger frame, so I think he'll be physically ready to play earlier if he's willing to put in the work. But he also has he can spin it, man. He can really spin it. And I would allow him to get that opportunity to develop next season. And then also you've got CJ coming in. You develop CJ. CJ Carr is going to get a lot out of being an early enrollee, more than most big-time quarterbacks, because to me, CJ needs the most weight room work of other big-time quarterbacks. And that's something that I'm excited about, that I think a lot of people are kind of missing the boat is, first of all, CJ's got plenty of arm talent and plenty of arm strength. He's got great arm talent. He's got plenty of enough arm strength to make the throws he needs to make already. But when you get CJ Carr 6, 7, 8 months in a Notre Dame strength and conditioning program, assuming it's still good, which, we'll have to see who that next hire is, his arm strength is going to take off. I'm telling you, he's not going to all of a sudden look like, Joe Milton. I'm not saying that, right? Let's not get carried away, but you add a little bit more zip, about 5 to 7 more yards on his deep ball, and CJ is going to be really good. And so between that and Kenny Minchie, I'm at the point now where I'm ready to say, hey, look, unless there's a dude out there, a Riley Leonard type, a Caleb Williams type, a Bo Nix type, guys that we have seen come in, a Sam Hartman type, I'm not going to make that move. You ask about Jack Cohn. I don't know that Jack Cohn would be that kind of guy, because Jack only had 1 year of starting experience under his belt. I would need a guy that's either incredibly talented or has a lot more experience. And so that's where I would look. So that's my, people have asked me, that's my take, is you go to the portal this year no matter what. Right now, I'm going for a depth guy. I want to develop Kenny Minchie. I want to develop Steve Angeli, and I want to develop CJ Carr. And then when you get Deuce in the next year, you've got a process of development that's rolling along. And then you develop Deuce, and then when his time comes, he'll be ready to go out there and do what he needs to do as well. That's what I would do. So barring there being some portal quarterback, and somebody just asked, is there anybody out there other than Leonard? I don't know that Leonard's out there. I mean, why would Riley Leonard necessarily want to leave Duke? He's got a good situation going there as well. I'm not saying he'll want to leave. I'm just using him as an example because he's the kid that people were talking about in that show or in that message board chat. He's that type of guy. A lot of the other big-time quarterbacks in the country right now Michael Penix doesn't have any eligibility left. Shedeur Sanders is not going anywhere other than where his dad's going. I believe Cam Ward has another year left, but why would he transfer again? And that would make him a 2-time transfer. So maybe he's a graduate. It might work. Jaden Daniels is pretty much out of eligibility, I believe, after this season. Caleb Williams isn't going anywhere. He's either going to be playing for USC or playing in the NFL. So that's kind of who are those other guys? Who are those other guys that you look at and say, boy, if that guy jumps in the portal, I got to take him. Quinn Ewers isn't going anywhere. Here's an example, right? Malik Murphy at Texas. Tons of talent. That guy has a lot of ability. With Quinn Ewers is going back to college next year, is Malik Murphy going to stay? Maybe. What if Malik stays and he's the guy, he beats out Arch Manning and Arch Manning jumps in the portal? Those are two very talented quarterbacks. I'm not touching either one of them if I'm Notre Dame, because they're unproven. They're every bit as unproven as the guys you have. So it's not about getting a talented guy. It's about getting a guy that is experienced and proven. Let's say Tyler Van Dyke jumps in the portal. I'd consider Tyler Van Dyke. The list is not very long of guys that I would look at. If Jaden Daniels has a year of eligibility left, and I don't know that he does, and he doesn't want to be with Brian Kelly anymore, I think you kind of have to look at him to a degree. There just aren't a lot of guys like that out there right now that I would look at. So to me, my focus would be on developing those players. That's where I'm at. And so I would say focus on developing your kids unless some dude is out there and he has interest in you. And you got to be careful too, because if you put the full court press on a kid that doesn't necessarily want you and he goes somewhere else, that can have some very negative ramifications of it. This is why I wrote the article I did a couple of years ago that's saying Notre Dame should not go after Caleb Williams in the portal, because we all knew he didn't want to go. He wasn't going to go Notre Dame. He was going to follow Lincoln Riley or go to some school that was going to give him money. He wasn't going to go to Notre Dame. So why waste the time recruiting a guy you know you're not going to get and risk potentially alienating your current roster and the recruits that you're bringing in? It didn't make any sense. And so you got to be careful about that one as well. And so that's why I say Notre Dame right now needs to focus on developing their quarterbacks, but you keep your eye open if that right guy comes along, because Notre Dame is at a point now where the roster is such that even with the losses they're going to have next year, you're going to start entering every season with a chance to compete for a championship. The way that Marcus Freeman is recruiting, the way this team is already constructed, that you're going to go to the portal to get those missing pieces at a couple positions, safety maybe wide receiver, to where if you can just get a couple pieces here and there, well, you got a chance to be really, really good. Florida State completely changed their team around this offseason with like 3 transfers. Ventrell Cypress at corner, Braden Fisk at D tackle, and Keon Coleman at wide receiver. They didn't go out and get 20 guys. They got more than that, but those are the 3. Those are the primary. Those are the guys that are really impacting this football team. Notre Dame, look what they've done. Look at their transfers have done for them. Look what Sam Hartman's done for them. Look what Javante Jean-Baptiste has done for them. Look at what Thomas Harper has done for them. It's not a lot of numbers, but it's been guys that have been very, very impactful for Notre Dame. They should continue to do that while also trying their best to develop their own quarterbacks. I think that's the big thing for me, and that would be my take. People can keep talking about it all they want, but now I'm on record as saying that's my plan. Development, unless there's a dude out there. And if there's a dude out there, then that wants to be at Notre Dame, then you owe it to your team and you owe it to your program to say that's a move that gives us a better chance to go compete for a championship this season. And it's going to have to be that kind of guy. So that's going to do it for this part of the show. I do have 3 super chats I want to get to here real quick before we get out of here, and then we're going to call it a day. I hope you guys enjoyed the show today. I had fun today, even though my voice is pretty much shot. My throat's a little jacked up, but hey, rule number 76, no excuses, play like a champion. So let's quickly get to these 3 questions. Benjamin Weiss with a super chat. Thank you, Benjamin. Appreciate that very, very much. Goes off topic. Sorry. When you say Golden turned the D-line loose versus Duke, should have against OSU as well. Can you explain that, please? Isn't their job to get in the backfield into the ball every play? We broke this down a lot yesterday. And what I would encourage you to do, Benjamin, is go back and watch the Duke game and how they were utilized, and then go back and watch the NC State game. Then go back and watch Central Michigan, and go back and watch Navy and Tennessee State and even Ohio State. And a lot of the impact that they were doing was at the line of scrimmage. It was eating up blocks, it was taking on blocks, it was trying to get a hard vertical push through a guy. They were not being turned loose, meaning they were not being used to attack. What we saw against Duke was a lot more winning in gaps at times, beating guys around, not running through guys, but getting around guys. Now, you got to take a tight track. And I thought Al Washington's group did a really nice job of that, where you're getting into a gap, but you're not letting them wash you down as you try to shoot a gap. And they did a really nice job with that. But it was more about, instead of being stout and kind of like a great military term would example would be this. So like, you understand the old, you see the movies like the old phalanx like formations, right? Where you kind of get the shields together and it's about being as one, and it's about taking a step. Right? And taking a step, and there can be no penetration. We got to get a push. We got to get a push. But it's like slow and steady and all that. That's what they were doing before, right? Where we're going to be here. We're going to be stout. We're not going to let you throw us. We're going to be really physical at the point of attack. Then there's more of like the aggressive, like the blitzkrieg, the more the kind of just dominate, just run through it, get vertical, get penetration, get into enemy territory, and cause havoc. You think of you think of how you have a special forces unit, right? where it's like, hey, you're it's not this big old force. It's strong. It's quick strike. It's getting into enemy territory, getting a quick strike, and then going. That's kind of the difference right there. And if you watch the Duke game, that's exactly what they did. It was vertical, and even when they were doing twists, Benjamin, it was stuff that was getting twists, that was getting up the field. Howard Cross's last big sack was a twist. He was slanting across, but he was physical. He got low and he got vertical through the gap, and that's what they need to do a lot more of. So hopefully that answers your question. Zibby94 says, do you feel Sam Hartman is holding on to the ball too long? If so, is this a play calling issue or a Sam Hartman issue? Not really. See, here's kind of what we do as fans, right? We take things that happen at times, and then we assume it only happens at Notre Dame. And I'm not saying you're doing this, Zibby94, but this is kind of where I think these things come from. It happens a couple times here. It happens on this particular play. And then it becomes it's this big issue. It's really not a big issue. There have been times when Sam Hartman has held the ball too long. No doubt. There have been times when Caleb Williams has held the ball too long, when Quinn Ewers has held the ball too long, when Michael Penix has held the ball too long. And I could go down the line and literally list you every starting quarterback, and that's going to be true at times. Other times that Sam Hartman has held on the ball too long, it's because guys aren't getting open. Either they got jammed at the line, they're not getting open soon enough, because sometimes you can get open, but because you didn't get a good clean release, you got open too late and the quarterback's off your read. I think at other times, Sam has at times gone through his progressions a little too quickly and didn't stay on a read long enough and then allow it to come open. But there's been times when, you see as a fan, oh, this guy backside got open and Sam's looking over here and he ends up scrambling. Well, that guy wasn't part of the read. The pre-snap read took him here. They got jammed up. They didn't make a play. Defense dropped into something different, whatever the case may be. And then you look back and say, hey, man, if you'd have looked over here, maybe he made a mistake. Maybe that read just didn't take him there, and that is going to cause you to hold on the ball too long. So I have not noticed that Sam Hartman's holding on the ball too long, longer than normal for the most part. Have there been snaps when that's happened? Absolutely. And that's all part of getting on the same page with your group. There's going to always be some of that as well. And that's something that they're going to have to continue to get better at, in my opinion. He's not going to have to get better at. The receiver's going to have to get better at. The offense is going to have to get better at. They're going to have to play with more urgency, play with more speed, more tempo. I think those things will help Sam Hartman out a ton. Joe Medina says, surprised that the LSU media is blaming the LSU roster for the team's issues. They're not willing to admit BK is the common denominator. Deja vu, eh? No, I'm not surprised, because I watched the Notre Dame media do that for a decade. I watched Notre Dame fans do that for a decade. Do you know how much hate I used to get on social media and message boards from fans who, you're a hater, you just don't like Brian Kelly, you only coach Division III football. That's my favorite, right? My favorite is from people who never coach football, saying that first of all, I coached at higher levels in Division III football, but if that's supposed to be some like insult, which always kind of made me laugh. And there was always be, well, it's he can't throw the balls for him. He can't block for him. And there's all this Brian Kelly hero worship that made me sick. And part of it was because Brian Kelly wanted that. He was always talking down his team. He was always, hey, we're here, we're there. We're not sure about this. We're not sure about that. So that way, when the team would go out there and be really good, he could take all the credit. What a great coaching job Brian Kelly did. And you're like, did he really? Did he really do a great job coaching? It's like, he did a good job, but did he do a great job? No, he talked the team down so much so that when they were successful, he'd go out there and be considered this great coach. And so that kind of always just really frustrated the heck out of me, and I don't know. It always bothered me. So I'm not surprised at all that the LSU media is doing that in the places I've seen. I'm not surprised that there are some LSU fans. I don't think they're going to carry his water as long as Notre Dame fans and Notre Dame media did, though. I think most of them will turn on him a lot quicker than Notre Dame people did. But no, I mean, that's just and I don't know what it is. I don't know how Brian Kelly got. Well, I know how, because it had been so bad for so long that a guy comes in and he's winning X number of games, and you're like, I'm not going to criticize that guy. Like, this has been pretty fun. They're winning 10 games, 11 games, 12 games. They've been to 2 playoff appearances, and it's just like what I always said. He changed the standard at Notre Dame, but he changed it by lowering it. And that's something that just kind of made me sick, to be honest with you, and really is a reason I disliked him. I got pissed when he would blame Sam Mustipher for not snapping effectively in a hurricane, when in reality you should have been asking Sam Mustipher to do that. You know, there just will always be like, well, it's my fault, I'm the head coach, and then he would list like 10 reasons why it wasn't really his fault. And his complete unwillingness to blame his coaches just always drove me nuts, because in his world, if I say a coach is not doing the job, it means he made a mistake, and he's just utterly unwilling to admit he made a mistake. He's the second biggest narcissist that I see in public figure right now. So it drives me absolutely nuts. So no, I'm not surprised at all that the players are being thrown on the bus. I'll tell you this right now, though. I don't think the LSU players are going to handle it as well as Notre Dame guys did, because Notre Dame players just stopped caring after a while. They're like, look, man, this is the brotherhood. We don't care what fans say. We don't care what the media says. We don't care what BK says. We know who we are, and we're going to go out there and do what we need to do. And I think LSU fans won't handle it with the LSU players may not handle it with the same I don't even want to say it, because it's not a shot. It just means it's not that they're not smart enough or don't care enough. It's just more about how I don't think they're going to show the same loyalty to the program, to the school, to each other that the Notre Dame players did, and just keep it to themselves. I think their loyalty is going to manifest itself more publicly, if that's the way I can say it. So, yeah, I'm not surprised at all, because we saw this. And that was the funniest part when Kelly left. All the people that cover the team started saying all the crap about Kelly that I've been saying for years that they used to talk trash about me behind my back about. I thought that was hilarious. And is a big reason why our channel took off, because there's I've had a lot of people say, like, I didn't like listening to you before because you were so hard on Kelly. But when he left and everybody started repeating the same things you'd always been saying, he realized, like, it was this is always true. You were just the only one willing to say it. And I'm not the only one, but as far as like being at the bigger sites, I was the only one that really did that with any consistency. But I'm not surprised what's going on at LSU at all. And I'm also not surprised that he's not the coach that they think he is either. Terrence and Ashley Berger with the last super chat. Thank you very much, guys. Let's recap. Hit the like, subscribe. And if you're not on the message board, why not? That's a great question. It's the place to be. Get your husband to sign up, ladies, and you'll get all the wonderful benefits. And this is a comment here from Ashley Bergen. So appreciate that, Ashley, very, very, very much. And she is correct. Hit that like button, everybody. Make sure you subscribe to this channel. Hit that notification bell. And if you're not on the message board, why not? You're definitely missing out. So that's going to do it for today's show, everybody. I want to thank you all so very much for being with me today. It's just a lot of fun. We'll be back tomorrow. Ryan and I will have our Keys to Victory and prediction show. I may do a show tomorrow night because Sean Stiers will not be able to do the IB Nation Sports Talk tomorrow night. So we may do a second show about something tomorrow night. We'll see. You never know. We may do something on another channel. I'll have to let you guys know what we decide to do. Nathan Milton with a super chat. Brian D was always right. Preston guy is not right. PK sucks big time. Thank you for the super chat, Nathan Milton. For those listening via podcast, I had to read that because Nathan gave a super chat for it. So I had to honor that by reading that out loud. That's not me saying that, but I appreciate you very, very much. And then, of course, Friday, we will have our recruiting show on Friday. So no mailbag on Friday. We had that on Monday. We have our recruiting show on Friday. We'll have the post-game show on Saturday from the hotel. Upon further review, Vince and I will be driving back from Louisville on Sunday. We'll be breaking down the film as we take turns driving. And we will have a Sunday night show, upon further review, Sunday night show, breaking down the Louisville game. And then we'll be back on track with our Monday mailbag. So have a great one, everybody. And we'll talk to you again very, very soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.